કેવું લાગે તમને સર ડાયરેક્ટ ટેક્સનું ફ્યુચર?
કેતનભાઈ સંભળાવ નહીં મને કીધો હતો.
ફરીવાર કેતનભાઈ રિપીટ કરો.
અરે હું એવું કહું છું સુબ્રમણ્યમ સ્વામી છે ને વારાઘણી આપણને ડરાવતા હતા કે અમે ઇન્કમ ટેક્સ નાબૂદ કરી દઈશું, ઇન્કમ ટેક્સ નાબૂદ કરી દઈશું.
નથી, અવાજ ક્લિયર નથી આવતો. મને એવું લાગે છે કે મારા સાઈડથી કઈ તકલીફ છે.
તો કેતનભાઈ
યસ સર.
હેડફોન યુઝ કરો સર, તમારો અવાજ ક્લિયર નથી આવતો. દિવ્યાંગ સર.
હા બોલો.
ઓકે, પીપીટી ચાલુ થઈ ગયું તમારું વ્યવસ્થિત? તો આપણે વિધિન 1-2 મિનિટમાં આપણે સ્ટાર્ટ કરી શકીએ.
ડન, નો વરી, વી કેન.
હિરલ મેમ.
Yes.
ઓકે, વોઇસ ક્લિયર આવે? ઓકે પ્રશાંતભાઈ, સ્ટાર્ટ.
Okay, Sanjay. Very good afternoon to all friends. It is our indeed pleasure to welcome to all of you on today's seminar arranging on Zoom platform. Before we move ahead, I request to all the members to put your hands on a heart for our ICI motto song.
यशस्सुप्तेषु जाग्रति यशस्सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामक्षो निर्विमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः सर्वे तदुनाद्यते कश्चन एतद्वैता
नहीं वो अभी वापस मत करना.
Thank you, members. Friends, we can see that in a day-to-day, there are so many amendment comes, new notification, new circular, press release and all in GST as well as in income tax. And so that we need to update our own self to comply the same. We need to take care about all the compliances that is applicable to us in our routine practice. Forgotten of anything that will require to pay a huge cost. And to save from it, our study circle arranging a seminar on a topic of year-end compliance in income tax and GST. And for that, we have a very eminent, dynamic and learned speaker, CA Divyang Shah sir from Ahmedabad. Sir, our study circle acknowledge your valuable presence on this Zoom platform. Friends, we have divided today's seminar in 2 parts. The first session on a topic of year-end compliance in income tax. And for that, we have a very eminent, dynamic and learned speaker, CA Divyang Shah sir from Ahmedabad. I request to CA Hiral Kikani to give an introduction of our speaker. Please.
Thank you, Prashant bhai. Good afternoon, everyone. I, CA Hiral Kikani, welcomes you all on behalf of Varacha Katargam CP Study Circle. It's my pleasure to introduce our today's speaker, CA Divyang Shah. Sir is a practicing chartered accountant having a main practice of appeal since 2010. He has served as a member of different committees of the Ahmedabad branch of WRC of ICAI in different years from 2012 to till date. He had also remained a member of Direct Tax Committee for giving a post-budget memorandum on Finance Act 2016 and also the Finance Act 2017 on behalf of Ahmedabad branch of WIRC of ICAI. He is a regular speaker at Ahmedabad branch of WIRC of ICAI on the topic of Income Tax Act. Sir has an experience to deliver lecture to income tax officers and inspector at different forum of income tax departments training center, which is also known as direct tax regional training center. Sir also a visiting faculty at Bank of Baroda's training institute known as Baroda Apex Academy for their employees on tax law. Sir had delivered many lectures at different study circle and also at different branches of WIRC of ICAI for the larger benefits of the CA fraternity. Has also delivered lectures at CA Association Ahmedabad and the Tax Advocate Association Gujarat. Sir is faculty at GMCS course conducted by Ahmedabad branch of WIRC of ICAI for the topic on assessment and appeal under the Income Tax Act. Also a faculty in MSOP training at Ahmedabad chapter of the Institute of Company Secretary of India for topic income tax. He also former visiting faculty at HL Institute of Commerce and BK Majmudar Institute of Business Administration at Ahmedabad University. Thank you. Welcome again, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
દિવ્યાંગ સર ક્વેશ્ચન આન્સર સેશન આપણે લાસ્ટમાં લઈશું કે ઇન બિટવીન ચાલશે?
જે રીતે કરવું છે તમારે કઈ રીતે કરવું છે? આઈ એમ રેડી ફોર બોથ ધ થિંગ્સ. ક્વેશ્ચન આન્સર પહેલા લેવા હોય તો એ લઈ લઈએ.
નહીં, મેમ્બરના ક્વેશ્ચન આવશે તો હું પુટ કરતો જઈશ આ મેસેજમાં.
ડન છે. અને મને જે ક્વેશ્ચન ઓલરેડી પહેલા મળી ગયા છે ને, તે કામ કરું, યર એન્ડના જે અમુક બેઝિક વસ્તુ ધ્યાન રાખવાની છે ને, બહુ ઓછી છે. આઈ જસ્ટ કવર ધેટ થિંગ ફર્સ્ટ. પછી we take the question answers which is already sent to me by the Sanjay bhai કે some questions are there which is not directly related with the topic પણ income tax ના questions છે.
ઓકે સર.
બરાબર ને?
Yeah.
My humble request to each participants, if you had any query, just post the same in the chat box. I think Prashant bhai will coordinate just to solve to get a reply from my side.
Sure, sir.
Shall I start, Prashant bhai, or
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so as usual, it is always a pleasure to be over here, and again, I'm repeating rather every time that young people are managing this study circle very, very, very well, and lots of people are coming together just to learn everything very good, and good topics are selected. So, with that appreciation, I'm starting my topic, that is the year-end compliance. So, I think year-end compliance, if you are talking about what are the year-end compliance, normally it was before 3 or 4 years. The first thing which was a year-end compliance was the filing a late return. So if our income tax return is not filed on time, then that can be filed up to the end of the each assessment year. So which assessment year is going on? That is assessment year 2021-22. So earlier it could be filed the late return by 31st of March 2022, but now amendment is made before 1 or 2 years back that they have said even a late return can be filed before 3 months from the end of the relevant assessment year. These are the wording mentioned in section 139, subsection 4 and 5. So now even a bill dated return or a revised return. Bill dated return means return original is not filed, but now I want to file the first original return. But as we are late, it is called late return in our general terminology. So that return could have been filed by 31st of December 2021, but original income tax return due date, which was 31st of July or 31st of October, that itself was extended into 15th of January or 15th of February, depending on the audit is applicable or not. So now that time limit has no value. Okay? So first of all, income tax return can be filed by 31st of March. My answer is no, as per because of change in the provision. So I'm just sharing a screen also just in a while. Give me a second. Visible to everyone?
Yes, sir. Visible. Yes.
Okay, done. So shared window is closed. Just visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, done. So first topic, what we are going to take is the year-end compliance. Not much year-end compliance is there from the chartered accountant side nowadays. First of all, income tax return can be filed by December 31st of March. Answer is no. It was already lapsed. So now, for example, assessment year 20 to 23 we are talking about. Let me say so. Now for that, time limit to file the return will be 31st July because audit is not applicable. So that we have filed, for example, no. So original return on time is not filed. So can we file the late return? So provision says yes, you can file the late return, but up to 3 months prior to the end of the relevant assessment year. So relevant assessment year is a 20 to 23. Prior to 3 months from the end of that will be 31st of December 2022. So now even a late return can be filed only up to 31st of December 2022 for assessment year 20 to 23. Same is the provision for a revised return. Let me reframe what is a revised return. For example, I file the original return wherein I find some apparent mistake or error or omission is there in the return filing. Can I revise my return? Answer is yes, but only again deadline will be 31st of December 2022 for assessment at 20 to 23. So 31st March compliance is now gone. Now then after, so what I have mentioned over here, same bill later return and revised return time limit was already ended on 31st of December 2021. But now even this limit is practically not useful. Why? Because original time limit to file the original return was 31st July or it was a 31st of October. But that is also extended to 15th of March or 15th of February. It depends which kind of audit you have or not to the assessee. So I'm not discussing point number 2 because that time limit is already over. Is that okay? So now what could be the time? What could be year-end compliance of the 31st of March? So second would have been the tax audit report. Well, ideally tax audit report is required to be filed before 1 month from the 1 month before from the due date of income tax return filing. So that time limit is already over. So listen me very carefully. Now there are chances that your client or you have filed your audit report for your client. Now, while return is filed then after. So let me assume on 30th September 2021, your tax audit report is filed. Then after by 31st of October 2021, even income tax return is filed. Now in February, intimation or notice for adjustment under section 143(1)(1)(a) is received, wherein they are saying we आपने tax audit report में ये disallowance दे दिया है, and that same disallowance is not offered into the income tax return. Am I with? Are you all with me? Again, I'm repeating. For example, in the time of a tax audit report, you have mentioned that interest on which TDS is not deducted is disallowable, or some, for example, some petrol expense, personal expenditure is there, which is mediclaim, which is the mentioned as a disallowable expenditure in tax audit report. But in the income tax return, you have not disallowed the same. That's why we propose the adjustment. Now, if you refer that, where is the mistake in this case? Normally, what happens in the income tax return, that expenditure is normally disallowed, but it is not properly disclosed in the income tax return. So in that case, you need to change the income tax return. But sometimes what happens while filing the tax audit report, some disallowance is offered by mistake. Because of the software mistake, some disallowance is offered, though actually no disallowance is required to be made. If that kind of mistake is available, can you revise the tax audit report? Yes. This is my understanding. After 31st of March, that revision may not be available. So if any revision is required in the tax audit report, better to do the same before 31st of March 2022. Now, let's refer the provision. Can anyone revise the tax audit report as per the provision? If you refer the section 44AB, which says tax audit is required to be filed. If you refer that provision, nowhere they have mentioned that one can revise the tax audit report. But provision does not give you option, but income tax side give you the option. So as per my opinion, if a revision is required, tax auditor can revise the tax audit report, and you can save your assessee from being harassed through the demand as raised in the intimation under section 143(1). Is that clear? So that will be applicable. Now, there are some chances that your tax audit report is not filed at all, and now you get to know that tax audit report to file karna tha. So can you file the late? Answer is yes. Now, let me take a provision first of all. If a tax audit report is not filed within the time, there will be penalty equivalent to 1.5 lakh or percentage of the turnover. Okay, now that is a penalty will be applicable. But penalty section along with that, there is also provision if a assessee proves that there was a reasonable cause because of which tax audit report could not be filed, then that penalty could not be levied. So if because of any reason tax audit report is not filed on time, better to file the same late before 31st of March, because as I have seen last year that after 31st of March, revision of tax audit report option was actually closed. So now you can do the same. And if you have filed the late tax audit report, so whenever penalty will be levied, you can mention there was a reasonable cause of 2 months or 3 months. You don't have filed the tax audit report at all. Can you mention there was a reasonable cause? No. Why? Because reasonable cause, for example, health issue or understanding issue, could be for 1 or 2 or 3 months. It cannot be there for the infinite time. Am I clear? For example, हमने बोला भाई chartered accountant was busy or having a health issue. और कोई बंदा मर गया था assessee के घर में से, because of COVID there was a death. Because of that reason, the audit report could not be filed on time. But that reason would be valid for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or 6 months. It cannot be valid for 2 years or 3 years. So if option is available to file the tax audit report late, one should file the same, and one can be saved from the penalty if a department levy the penalty. Then just limitation of this option would be this: whenever you file that late tax audit report, obviously there would be a assessment. Normally they select your case as an assessment because there is a late filing of tax audit report apparently. Is that clear? Any query for this part? You can post the same in the chat box. Okay, Shudhaji, I read your suggestion. It will be Hindi or English only. I want to use the Gujarati. Done. Next thing, what is year-end compliance? Year-end compliance would be paying a advance tax. So if a tax outflow is more than 10,000, advance tax is required to be paid. If you refer the provision of section 211, advance tax means that tax which is paid before 15th of March. But the same section also is mentioned then after in proviso that if you pay any amount before 31st of March, that will also be termed as advance tax. Why to pay advance tax? Because if you don't pay the advance tax, there will be the interest leviable. That's why one should pay the advance tax. So that is the one thing. Now, one more thing. Whether now earlier under section 44 AD, it was clearly mentioned before 3 or 4 years back that if your assessee are covered under section 44 AD, there is a presumptive taxation scheme, then advance tax is not required to be paid. Now that proviso is omitted from that section. So now, if your assessees are covered in 44 AD, there is a presumptive taxation wherein the business turnover is less than 2 crore and you are declaring income at the rate of 6 or 8%. And if your assessees are covered by 44 ADA, meaning thereby your assessees are giving a professional services wherein their gross receipts are less than 50 lakh, and what they are declaring is a 50% of their receipt as an income. So if your assessee is covered by 44 AD or ADA, then also they need to pay the advance tax. But in that case, the installment which we need to pay by 15th of September or 15th of December, that is waived. So complete 100% amount of advance tax is paid by 31st of March 2022. Then no interest liability would be there on the assessees who are covered by section 44 AD or ADA. That is a good thing. One can take care. Any query for this part? Okay, done. So now I'm moving to next thing. Now, this is not directly related with the topic, but still much relevant in the now scenario. Third point, which I'm referring para point number 4, third point. file income tax return under section 148 on time, and we can avoid interest under section 234A. Okay, let's first of all let's recall the provision. Section 234A is a section which says interest will be applicable if a return is not filed within the time. That is a provision. So now the client has already filed the income tax return for assessment year 16-17 on time. So 234A interest should not be there, yes. But now your client got the notice under section 148 for reassessment. And in the notice, they have asked to file the income tax return within 30 days. Now, take a scenario that your client or you on behalf of your client has not filed the return under section 148. And you simply wait for the notice. And they mentioned कि भाई इसमें ये issue था, इसका आप आंसर दीजिए. आपने issue में आंसर भी दे दिया. And finally, there is addition. If in 148 assessment, if you don't have filed the return in response to 148 notice, and then after addition took place, so there will be 234A interest leviable. Why? Because section 234A subsection 3 clearly says where 148 में return file नहीं किया है, so then after whatever additional income is added on that, interest will be leviable. Is that clear? So my humble submission to everyone who are handling the reassessment proceedings and who got the notice for their client under section 148, wherein they have asked to file the return, please file the return under section 148, though your 148 return and your original return both are same. If because of any technical glitches you cannot file the 148 return, then please simply write the letter on the income tax portal by mentioning that treat my original return as a 148 return. If you have done this thing, then 234A interest will not be leviable. Let me tell you, if there is a tax demand of approximately 10 lakh, you can save at least a 30, 40 or 50,000 rupees of interest if you just didn't have this basic exercise. Is that clear?
Sir, one question regarding advance tax paid required under section 44AD or 44ADA.
Okay.
Is if there is a turnover of rupees 1 crore in the end of March month.
Yes.
Net profit is rupees 6 lakh. So do we need to pay interest on it?
First of all, I think question is, do we need to pay advance tax?
Yes.
Answer is yes. Advances is so. First of all, Vijay bhai, your query is something like this. Let me. Your assess is covered by 44AD, and turnover is 1 crore, and declare your all the amount are received through a banking channel, and that's why you're declaring 6% of the profit of your turnover. So your client is covered by 44AD. The question is, do you need to pay? Whether your client need to pay advance tax? Answer is yes. On the 6 lakhs of the net profit, what is the tax? That is more than 10,000 years, you need to pay the advance tax. If you don't pay the advance tax, yes, interest will be leviable. Again, I'm repeating Vijay bhai, earlier, paying advance tax was not the requirement before 2 years, but now they have omitted that proviso. So now interest is applicable, but where it is mentioned that assessors need to pay advance tax, that section is 211. Over there, they have given the format कि भाई कैसे advance tax pay करना है. तो कभी company है तो 4 बार. That is from starting from 15 July, 15 September, 15 December, and 15 March. If it is other than non-corporate assessee, it will be from 15 September, 15 December, and 15 March. Only 3 installments. And over there, it is clearly mentioned that if anyone is covered by 44AD or ADA, then the advance tax is required to be paid by 15th of March. So 100% of advance tax need to be by 15th of March. You don't need to pay installment wise, but yes, advance tax is required to be paid by 15th of March or 31st of December. If you have paid that, yes, interest will not be leviable. Otherwise, yes, it will be leviable. Am I clear, Vijay bhai? Done. Next query is there. I think query would be good. Thank you, first of all, for participation. Huh? And thank you, Vijay bhai, for the answer. I mean, responding to my query. 44ADA, assessee advance tax payable, but not paid on or before, but paid before 31st of March 2022. Then it is interest applicable? No, Hitesh bhai, again I'm repeating. Section 211 says you need to pay advance tax. तो वहां पे एक प्रोवाइजो लिखा हुआ है एक सबसेक्शन में जहां लिखा हुआ है if your advance tax is paid before 31st of March, it will be treated as advance tax. Because of that, interest will not be applicable. So Hitesh bhai, if you pay the advance tax before 31st of March, in your client case, assess you don't need to pay interest on that at the time of filing the return. Hitesh bhai, clear je? Done. Okay. Shall we move to next? And my last point, please be careful of for 148 reassessment. It is a very basic thing, but believe me, it is not known to anyone, because no one is taking care of interest. सही से गिना है कि नहीं गिना है. In one case, I need to calculate the interest. That's why I got to know this information. Otherwise, अब तो क्या होता है? Who calculate the interest manually? No one. So whatever department asks for, we pay the same, unless addition is not right. Is that clear? Moving to next. So next thing, PPTs are, I'm just stop sharing. Okay, done. Okay, done. Is that fine if I pin myself, Prashant bhai?
Sir, PPT.
Yes.
Okay, then PPTs are closed actually. One query is there from the Nidhi Agrawal. Query is something like this. Can you explain 148 section again? Okay, done. I'm just repeating what I have said into 148 related matter. If a notice under section 148 is issued, under section 148, we need to file the income tax return within 30 days. Normally, lots of people don't file the income tax return in response to 148, though original return is filed on time. So if you doing this way, then at the end of the reassessment, if there is some addition took place, so if you refer the calculation of your demand, then over there will be interest levied under section 234A. Now, what is a 234A interest? That is interest applicable when you don't have filed the return on time. तो आपका ओरिजिनल तो टाइम पे फाइल किया था, बट आपने 148 के सामने जो रिटर्न टाइम पे फाइल नहीं किया है ना, उसके सामने वो इंटरेस्ट लगा रहा है. बिकॉज सेक्शन 234A सबसेक्शन 3 में साफ लिखा है, अगर 148 के सामने आपने रिटर्न टाइम पर फाइल नहीं किया है तो भी इंटरेस्ट लगेगा. और वो कब लगेगा इफेक्टिवली? जब आपका एडिशन हुआ है तो. सो निधि जी, माय रिक्वेस्ट, माय पॉइंट इज दिस: व्हेनेवर anyone got the notice under section 148 wherein it is asked to file the return within 30 days, please file the same, though your original return income and your this return income is same. वही आपको फाइल करना है, कुछ नया नहीं करना है. Is that clear, निधि जी? Done. Okay, so moving to next point basically. Just a minute. Okay, done. So just a minute, let me share the another PPT. Okay, so what other year-end compliance you can make? I think these are point not yet required to be discussed. Till I have covered whatever payment is required to be made to claim the deduction under section 80C or chapter 6A. Most of the deductions are available based on the payment. If you don't have make the payment before 31st of March, the deduction will not be available. So you can take care on behalf of your client. Most of the chartered accountant or many chartered accountant are not involved in this. Year पे year return जब आएगा, अगर पे किया है तो deduction लेंगे, वरना नहीं लेंगे. So most of the CE are not involved into guiding their assessee कि deduction claim किया कि नहीं किया, payment किया कि नहीं किया. But still you can take care of this. One more point which is useful. Please pay attention. This point is in relation to the PPF. I'm explaining this point in a context to one example. For example, there is a PPF of Divyang Shah. In Divyang Shah's PPF, 1.5 lakh is paid fully. Now, whenever we are talking about the PPF, in the payment, if a payment is made in PPF, that will be allowed as a deduction that is mentioned in section 80C. But for governing the PPF, there are separate rules. कि PPF के अलग से rules है, उस हिसाब से हमें payment करना चाहिए. तो PPF rules are there or act is there, which says कि हम 1.5 lakh से ज़्यादा pay नहीं कर सकते. Am I right? So अगर मैंने मेरे PPF account में 2 लाख डाल दिए 21 साल में, so as per the PPF rules, on the extra 50,000 which I deposit in my PPF account, उस पे interest नहीं मिलेगा. ये कहाँ लिखा है? PPF के rules में लिखा हुआ है. Same way in the PPF rules it is mentioned like this. अगर मेरा PPF account है दिव्यांग शाह का, and my son name is, for example, my son name is Jinar Shah, उसका भी PPF account है. Now minor child minor cannot open the PPF account directly. उसके लिए guardian होना पड़ता है. So in my son's account, who is a guardian? That is Divyangsha. So if I deposit 1.5 lakh in my PPF account, and I also deposit 1.5 lakh in a Jina Shah account, wherein I am the guardian. So my investment will be 3 lakh. So very less people are aware of. On the extra 1.5 lakh of investment, I am not eligible to get the interest. Again, I'm repeating. If I am a guardian of my child, तो वो जो पैसा वहां पे हो रहा है और मेरे पीपीएफ में जो पैसा पे हो रहा है वो दोनों कंबाइन करके 1.5 लाख से ज्यादा नहीं होना चाहिए. If that is the scenario, if your payment is more than 1.5 lakh, the bank may not grant you interest over the excess payment above the 1.5 lakh. So this is the thing you need to be careful. Very less people are aware of. इसमें कोई query है? ये बात किसी को पता थी? Anyone is not aware of this thing? Please put the same in the chat box. Anyone is not aware of this basic thing? Please mention the same in the chat box. So I may get to know कभी पता था कि नहीं? अच्छा सबको पता था. Great. Moving to next. Okay, so you can take a deduction differently. Now one more thing. See, earlier, before 7 or 8 years before, HUF could have their own PPF account, but अब वो HUF का खुद का PPF account allowed नहीं है. So now, whether HUF, for example, Divyangsha HUF is making a payment in my name, so whether HUF will get a deduction, answer is yes. So you can have a planning by this way. So your HUF is paying for PPF of their members. अगर ऐसा है, then HUF will get a deduction. So होता क्या है? For example, I am already investing in a mutual fund under ELSS mutual fund. So I am already getting a 1.5 lakh deduction because of the mutual fund payment or LIC payment. So for getting deduction, I don't need to invest in PPF. So by diverting my fund from HUF to my PPF, HUF can claim a deduction. This is a good tax planning available with everyone. So one can take care of this thing. Okay, done. One more thing. So this is the assessment year 21-22. So new assessment year will start. This point is already covered earlier also. Again, I'm repeating because this is important. I'm referring point number 6, applicable for section 194A, C, H, I, and J. Now A is applicable interest other than security. C is for contract payment, H for commission, I for rent, J for professional fee. Now, under this 5 section, earlier, this section were not applicable to individual HUF who are not covered by 44AB audit in the preceding financial year. Meaning thereby, इस साल ये financial कौन सा है? 21-22. तो इस साल मुझे TDS करना है. Answer would be no under this section if in a 1920, if I am not covered by the tax audit under section 44AB. बाद में क्या हुआ? टैक्स ऑडिट में लिमिट 1 करोड़ थी, 44ED में हो गई 2 करोड़. टैक्स ऑडिट 44ED में क्या लिखा है? 1 करोड़ से ज्यादा है तो ऑडिट करवाओ. बाद में आप प्रोवाइजो में लिखा है अगर 44ED में कवर हो रहे हो, आपका टर्नओवर 2 करोड़ से कम है तो 44ED का ऑडिट नहीं आएगा. देन आफ्टर दे मेंशन दैट इफ योर receipts and payment in cash is restricted to only 5%, देन आल्सो आपको ऑडिट नहीं करवाना है. कहां तक? 5 करोड़ तक. बाद में वो लिमिट भी कर दी 10 करोड़. So now take a scenario. There are some individual whose turnover is 9 crore, but he is not required to get the accounts audited under section 44AB. Why? Because uska cash payment and cash receipt is restricted to only 5%. So now ये section में link तो दिया था 44AB का, so they remove that link. So now in this section they have mentioned अगर आपके एसएससी का 1920 में अगर टर्नओवर बिजनेस है तो टर्नओवर 1 करोड़ से ज्यादा है, अगर प्रोफेशन है तो रिसीट 50 लाख से ज्यादा है. इन दैट केसेस इन दिस 21-22 द टीडीएस प्रोविजन विल बी एप्लीकेबल. तो 21-22 में एप्लीकेबल कब होगा? जब 20-21 में आपका टर्नओवर 1 करोड़ या 50 लाख से ज्यादा है. तो प्लीज वेरीफाई कर लीजिए कि आपके कुछ एसएससी से हो सकते हैं जो 44AD में कवर्ड है. व्हाई? क्योंकि 1 करोड़ से ज्यादा होगा, 2 करोड़ से कम होगा, स्टिल दे आर कवर्ड इन 44AD. तो आपको तो ऐसा ही लग रहा है वो टीडीएस कवर है ही नहीं, टीडीएस एप्लीकेबल है ही नहीं. नो, यू आर रॉन्ग. सो लेट मी टेक एन सिनेरियो. आपके क्लाइंट है जिसका टर्नओवर 1 करोड़ से 2 करोड़ के बीच में है, वो बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट मेंटेन करता नहीं है. एम आई राइट? आपके वहां क्या आता है? सिर्फ टर्नओवर. अगर वो 6% डिक्लेयर कर रहा है तो आइडियली 6% डिक्लेयर करने के बाद रिटर्न फाइल कर देते हो. अगर बाय चांस बैंक में से कुछ पेमेंट हुआ है फॉर एग्जाम्पल वो पेमेंट 1 लाख है, किसको पेमेंट किया, फॉर एग्जाम्पल कोई प्रोफेशनल पेमेंट है या फिर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट पेमेंट है 1 लाख का, तो उस पर टीडीएस एप्लीकेबल है? आंसर इज यस। इट इज अ डिफरेंट सिनेरियो कि वो एक्सपेंडिचर पे आपने टीडीएस नहीं किया, स्टिल इट इज नॉट डिसअलाउएबल। क्यों डिसअलाउंस नहीं हो सकता 40AIA में? क्योंकि 44AD में साफ लिखा हुआ है दैट 6% will be considered as a income, notwithstanding from section 28 to 44AB or something 44AA, ठीक है ना? तो डिसअलाउंस नहीं होगा, पर कैन दे डिमांड दी टीडीएस डिफॉल्ट अमाउंट फ्रॉम दी और असेसी? आंसर इज यस। टीडीएस डिफॉल्ट तो है ना, तो सेक्शन 201 में वो डिमांड कर सकते हैं कि टीडीएस डिफॉल्ट हुआ, आपने पे नहीं किया, मुझे टीडीएस दे दीजिए एटलीस्ट। सो ये थोड़ा लूप होल है, वी नीड टू बी केयरफुल। And my request to all the chartered accountant who are practicing, try to develop the SOP, standard operating procedure. आप जो चीजें चेक कर रहे हो ना, उसका एक एक्सेल शीट बना दीजिए, वो चेक हुआ है, अगर नॉट एप्लीकेबल है तो उस टाइम नॉट एप्लीकेबल कर देना। वो चेकलिस्ट नहीं रखोगे तो बिलीव मी, इवन आई एम नॉट एबल टू रिकॉल ऑल द प्रोविजन एट अ टाइम, क्योंकि इतने सारे अमेंडमेंट आ चुके हैं, तो पता भी नहीं कौन सा अमेंडमेंट कब आया था। इवन वी नीड टू रीड द बुक, ठीक है ना? तो ट्राई टू डेवलप द SOP। बिग फर्म्स are having a detailed SOP और उनके पास तो सॉफ्टवेयर्स है, because that software may not be affordable in the beginning of the practice, but we can do the same thing in the Excel sheet. उसमें आप applicable not applicable करके query भी raise कर सकते हो, write the same everything on the paper, that is Excel or Word file, that will help you in the next year कि लास्ट कौन सी query थी, तो वो query इस बार है कि नहीं वो चेक कर सकते हो, ठीक है ना? Then now last point, reconciliation. Any query? Any queries there? Okay, I think one query is there from Jignesh bhai. Any other query missed out? No. Okay, done. Query is something like this. If a rent paid for an entire financial year in a March is a 2.5 lakh and party is not covered under audit, is there provision of 50,000 per month TDS is applicable? Okay. There is a provision that in the complete financial year, yes, the provision is not a 50,000, it is a amount of a 6 lakh, I guess. I need to read the still provision. The 50,000 per month is there?
Both, sir, both are separate provision. 50,000 per month.
Just a minute. Jignesh bhai, can you recall the section of TDS? Just a minute. Section 194IB. Jignesh bhai, एक मिनट, provision वाचन तुमने कही दो. Let me reply from the provision itself. (194IB) 418B. Okay, done. So query something like this. If a rent paid for entire financial year is 2.5 lakh and party is not covered under audit, is the provision of 50,000. Okay, first of all, section 194IB says if a payment of a rent is paid by individual HUF and individual HUF is covered, his turnover in the preceding financial year is 1 crore in case of business and 50 lakh in case of profession. If your individual, your assessee turnover in the preceding financial year is more than 1 crore, Jignesh bhai. Okay, if a turnover is below 1 crore, then for 194IB is not applicable. If turnover is more than 1 crore and per month TDS is more than 50,000, then yes, TDS will be applicable. In this kind of cases, even TAN number is not required to be taken. Directly you can pay the tax. Clear, Jignesh bhai? Okay, done. Shall we move to next? Okay, now new is coming into picture. Reconciliation with the annual information return. So I think you must have known that lots of your clients are getting a notice. GST का turnover ये दिख रहा है in the income tax portal, in the EIS, and you don't have paid the advance tax. ऐसी notice काफी email में आई है. So before 31st March ends, you can also start reconciliation the annual information return. अगर आप income tax में login कर रहे हो ना, तो वहाँ आपके compliance portal में जा सकते हो. From the compliance portal, you can download the annual information return. This will be really useful because most of the transactions are reflected over there. So होता क्या है? If you are making an investment in the mutual fund, which is not more than 5 lakh. Why I'm saying not more than 5 lakh? Because एनुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन रिटर्न में पब्लिश कब होगा? जब आपका म्यूचुअल फंड में इन्वेस्टमेंट फाइल 5 लाख से ज्यादा है तो होगा ना. बट ओवर देयर ऑन द एनुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन रिटर्न एवरीथिंग इज विजिबल. इफ यू हैव मेड द इन्वेस्टमेंट ऑफ 1 लाख तो भी वहां दिख रहा है. तो आपने टीडीएस डिडक्शन हुआ है आपके क्लाइंट का, वो दिखेगा. आपका कोई टैक्स डिमांड है या रिफंड है, वो दिखेगा. इफ योर जीएसटी टर्नओवर जो है ना, वो भी वहां दिख रहा है. तो काम करते हैं, मैंने डाउनलोड करके रखा है एनुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन रिटर्न, उसका एक देख लेते हैं कैसा दिखता है. डन. विजिबल नहीं है ना अभी तक AIR? दिख रहा है AIR?
यस सर.
वही दिख रहा है ना, एनुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन रिटर्न दिख रहा है.
नहीं, अभी पीपीटी.
ओके, तो मुझे नया शेयर करना पड़ेगा. जस्ट ओके, दिस इज द एनुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन रिटर्न downloaded from the site. Just a minute. So जो पहले पार्ट में ना they mention the TDS amount. So on the whatever sections TDS is deducted वो यहाँ दिखेगा. तो पहले वो सेक्शन वाइज देते हैं. 194 है डिविडेंड है, 194 के बाद 194 इंटरेस्ट वाला है, उसके बाद 194J वाला है. ये सब TDS दिख रहा है. Then after again 194J कर रहा है, लास्ट में 1206CQ वाला भी है. तो फॉरेन रेमिटेंस किया ना, वो भी TDS हुआ, तो वो भी दिख रहा है यहाँ पर. Then after information relating to payment of tax, इसको टैक्स पे किया अभी तक, आंसर इज नो, तो इसलिए दिख नहीं रहा है. Information relating डिमांड और रिफंड कुछ है तो यहाँ दिखेगा पार्ट B4 में. 26 AS ही है, पर 26 AS का भी इज अ वाइड फॉर्म. लास्ट है एनी अदर इन्फॉर्मेशन रिलेटिंग टू सब रूल 2 ऑफ रूल 114I, देयर इज GST टर्नओवर. तो देखिए वो आपको दिखेगा यहाँ पर, ये रहा GST टर्नओवर. ये GST टर्नओवर है. तो 66 लाख का टर्नओवर कुछ हुआ है. तो ये जो फर्स्ट इन्फॉर्मेशन है ना, दिस इज द GSTR1 फाइल्ड बाय द असेसी, तो इसका टर्नओवर दिख रहा है यहाँ पर. सॉरी, GSTR3 भी है ना, उसका टर्नओवर दिख रहा है. देन आफ्टर the other party, for example I am, ये मेरा GST EIR है, तो फॉर एग्जांपल प्रशांत भाई ने have filed the GSTR1 क्योंकि उन्होंने GSTR1 में सेल दिखाई है. that sale will be my purchase, तो ये परचेज भी वहां दिख रही है. देखिए some इब्राहिम सैफुद्दीन व्यापारी has shown the purchase sale, तो it is my purchase, वो यहाँ पर दिख रही है. ये है परचेज मेरी, उसकी सेल हुई. ये GSTR1 सेलर ने फाइल किया है, तो मेरा परचेज हुआ, तो वो भी यहाँ पर दिख रहा है. सो एट द एंड ऑफ द ईयर यू कैन रिकंसाइल ऑल दिस इंफॉर्मेशन. सुमेल 6 में आई थिंक कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटी, क्या हुआ है, सप्लायर नेम GSTN, ये भी कुछ सप्लाई किया हुआ है. सो दिस इज इंफॉर्मेशन. तो सारी इंफॉर्मेशन दिख रही है. इवन यहाँ उन्होंने इन्वेस्टमेंट किया नहीं, अगर इन्वेस्टमेंट करते ना, कोई बैंक में कैश डिपॉजिट होती है, फिक्स्ड डिपॉजिट 10 लाख से ज्यादा होती, तो भी सब कुछ यहाँ पर दिखता. सो नाउ this is also one thing we need to take care before filing the income tax return. Ideally होता क्या है, what is my practice and what is my perception, अगर मैं income tax return फाइल कर रहा हूँ तो I am not going to audit the accounts. मैं बोल दूंगा आप अकाउंट्स ठीक से लिख के आना, whatever अकाउंट्स में दिख रहा है वो मैं उस तरह फाइल कर दूंगा. हाँ टीडीएस में चेक कर लूंगा, टीडीएस वाली इनकम दिख रही है कि नहीं, दैट्स इट। बाकी आपको अकाउंट्स अगर मैच नहीं हो रहे, दैट इज योर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी। हाँ, हम उनको एक बार 26 ईयर्स दे देंगे, यू कैन रिकंसाइल फ्रॉम योर साइड, अदरवाइज रिकंसाइल करने मत बैठना। एंड डोंट गिव द बैड हैबिट्स, मतलब कोई ऐसी आदत मत लगाना अपने क्लाइंट्स को, बाद में बोलेंगे ये तो आप ही का काम है ना। डोंट गिव द फ्री सर्विसेज। Okay, this annual information return can be filled for all assessee. Nidhi ji, I'm not clear from your what's your query is. Basically, annual information return is the kind of form 26 ES. वहाँ सारी information आपको दिखेगी. So before you file the income tax return of your assessee, you can verify कि उसमें जो income है EIR में वो books of account में दिखाई है कि नहीं, income tax return में दिखाई है कि नहीं. And annual information return हमें file नहीं करना है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल वो कौन फाइल करेगा? फॉर एग्जाम्पल जिसने टीडीएस डिडक्ट किया है वो फाइल करेगा, टीडीएस रिटर्न तो यहाँ दिख जाएगा। फॉर एग्जाम्पल मैंने परचेज या सेल किया है प्रॉपर्टी मोर देन 30 लाख, तो वो डॉक्यूमेंट रजिस्टर्ड होगा विद द रजिस्ट्रार, तो रजिस्ट्रार विल फाइल दी एनुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन रिटर्न, तो यहाँ दिखेगा कि मैंने परचेज किया है, सेल किया है। ओके, सो एप्लीकेबिलिटी ऑफ एनुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन रिटर्न इज नॉट ऑन योर क्लाइंट, वो कोई और कर रहा है पर आपके ट्रांजेक्शन वहां दिखेंगे, ठीक है ना। एनुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन रिटर्न के बहुत सारे अलग अलग क्राइटेरिया है। फॉर एग्जांपल आपने बैंक में 10 लाख से ज्यादा एफडी करवा दोगे तो बैंक विल फाइल द एनुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन रिटर्न बाय सेइंग कि भाई ये असेसी है अकाउंट होल्डर जिसका पान नंबर ये है और जिसने फिक्स डिपॉजिट 10 लाख से ज्यादा करवाई है, ठीक है। डन निधि जी? यस, परफेक्ट, योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज परफेक्ट। तो दिस आर द थिंग वी कैन टेक केयर ऑफ। और बाकी सब क्या हो सकता है? यस, टीडीएस डिडक्शन हुआ है कि नहीं, डिपॉजिट हुआ है कि नहीं, टीडीएस रिटर्न्स है, वो सब यूजुअल कंप्लायंस है, दैट आई एम नॉट कवरिंग डायरेक्टली। सो एक काम करते हैं, और भी सारे कुछ टीडीएस सेक्शंस है व्हिच वी शुड टेक केयर ऑफ। उससे पहले एक क्वेरीज थी जो मुझे मिली थी बिफोर द सेशन। संजय भी क्वेरी ले ली है ना?
Yes,
यस
sir.
सर, यस।
Okay. I'm first of all repeating the query over here. If anyone would like to understand from that context, so you can then you can understand that part. Okay, first query is something like this. What is the consequences if a past year's sundry creditors payments could not be paid by end of the next year? So again, I'm repeating. For example, in a financial year 1920, some purchase is there, so they are shown as a creditors. That payment is still outstanding. I have not paid that amount to my creditors. It is still outstanding. First of all, let me recall the section 41, cessation of liability. First of all, I'm giving the answer. If creditors are outstanding and you are showing the same creditors as a payable, then that creditors cannot be added as an income because of the cessation of liability. मतलब आपका liability अभी तक खड़ी है। हाँ, अगर इनकम टैक्स की स्क्रूटिनी आ रही है तो you need to explain कि भाई ये purchase genuine है and amount is payable. बोगस होगी तो obviously department can add the same, but just because amount is not paid to creditors, same cannot be added. One thing you can do, 68 में addition नहीं हो सकता, उसके लिए you need to prove कि वो outstanding genuine है. You can take the confirmation from the creditors. Second thing, there is a section 41 cessation of liability. So for example, in my books, for example, सामने वाला पार्टी बोल रहा है मैं पैसे नहीं लेने वाला हूँ, तो it's a different thing. पर आपके बुक्स में दिख रही है liability, तो वो cessation of liability नहीं होगा. Meaning thereby, जब तक आपकी बुक में पैसा दिख रहा है, that liability do exist. If you write off that liability as not payable, then you need to offer that amount as an income. Again, for example, amount is payable from Divyang to the Prashant bhai. For example, now I say कि मुझे ये पैसा पे नहीं करना है. Prashant bhai also agree or don't take the action. For example, agree नहीं हो रहे तो कुछ action भी नहीं ले रहे. मैंने अपने books में से वो liability निकाल दी. Whenever I remove that liability, that will be my income. ये कौन बोल रहा है? Section 41, subsection 1, cessation of liability. So my answer to your query is something like this. If in the books of account, if the liability to creditors are there, and it is not paid since that 1 year, 4 years, or 5 years, same cannot have any consequences. Okay, उसका कोई consequences नहीं है. Done? इस context में कोई query है?
सर इसके रिलेटेड मेरे को एक क्वेरी है कि अगर कोई मैंने इंपोर्ट परचेज किया है और मतलब मेरा जो स्पेसिफिकेशन था वो हिसाब से मेरा जो प्रोडक्ट मेरे को मिला नहीं है, तो
Okay.
उसकी वजह से मैंने अगर पेमेंट रुकाया है वो पार्टी का इम्पोर्ट,
हाँ.
और 2-3 साल हो गए हैं, अभी भी मेरे बुक्स पे वो खड़ा है।
Okay.
अभी उसके साथ नेगोशिएशन चल रहा है और हम वो पेमेंट करने वाले हैं, मतलब करने वाले हैं, अभी किया नहीं है। अगर इसके दौरान इसके बीच अगर कोई स्क्रूटिनी का नोटिस मतलब स्क्रूटिनी नोटिस आता है तो वो लोग कंफर्मेशन डिमांड करेंगे, लेकिन वो कंफर्मेशन अगर नहीं मिल पा रहा है तो वो 68 में एडिशन कर पाएंगे।
See, ideally, it is a basically purchase from outside India. It is an import.
Yes,
So in
yes.
case of the import, getting the confirmation, see, getting the confirmation is not possible every time.
Mm.
So in this case, if you can show okay, it is a purchase, goods are received, and that's why we have debited as a purchase, and amount is shown as a outstanding as a two creditors. So addition should not be made, but you should be prepared with the documents. ठीक है ना? अगर सच में आपका डिसाइड हो जाता है कि भी पैसा पे नहीं करना है उसको, फिर भी आप बुक्स में आउटस्टैंडिंग दिखा रहे हो ना, तो भी ऐसे बहुत सारे जजमेंट गुजरात हाई कोर्ट में है कि स्टिल इट कैन नॉट बी टेकन एज अ सेसेशन ऑफ लायबिलिटी। 68 में एडिशन तो नहीं हो सकता। 68 में एडिशन कब होगा? जब आप एक्सप्लेन नहीं कर सकते। एक्सप्लेन तो कर दिया, ठीक है ना?
ठीक है, ठीक है।
ओके, नेक्स्ट क्वेरी फ्रॉम नम्रता जी। इन प्राइवेट, ये क्वेरी जो चैट बॉक्स से ले रहा हूँ अभी फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, बाकी क्वेरी जो पहले मिली बाद में ले रहा हूँ। इन प्राइवेट लिमिटेड कंपनी में क्या MAK might trip collect TCS on foreign traveling expenses, should be liable to deduct TDS on this transaction or not? Okay, so first of all, make my trip collect TCS on foreign travel. So first of all, you travel outside India, so make my trip collect the TCS from you. If transaction is covered in the TCS, then TDS will not be applicable. ये TCS वाला प्रोविजन है ना, वो हम एक बार सेक्शन रिफर कर लेंगे लास्ट में, पर एज आई कैन रिकॉल अगर TCS हुआ है तो TDS नहीं होगा। ठीक है। संजय जी का क्वेश्चन है, FEMA does not allow such write off without RBI permission. Yes, that is a different scenario. तो प्रशांत भाई तुम्हारे FEMA भी देखो पड़ सकती है, एंगल थी।
Yes sir, yes sir.
Okay, done. Shall we move to next? Next query is there. Okay, next query. Whether it is compulsory to give interest on unsecured loan. Okay, interesting queries are there. So I'm just framing a first of all question or example. In my books of account, I have taken a loan from Prashant Bhai. So my query is there. I have taken a loan of from Prashant Bhai amounting to 10 lakh or 50 lakh, and I'm not paying interest. Whether it is a problematic, first of all, answer to this is something like this. If you read the income tax law, nowhere it is mentioned if for taking a genuine loan, you need to pay the interest. अगर आपके पास अनसिक्योर लोन है तो इंटरेस्ट पे करना जरूरी है, ऐसा कहीं नहीं लिखा है। हाँ, एक्ट में ऐसा लिखा है दैट इफ यू हैव टेकन द अनसिक्योर लोन एंड इफ यू कैन नॉट एक्सप्लेन कि भी आपको पैसा कहाँ से मिला, जिसके पास से मिला उसके पास इतने पैसे है देने के लिए, देयर इज अ कैपेबिलिटी, क्रेडिट वर्दीनेस। ओके, सो वेदर क्रेडिट वर्दीनेस इज देयर ऑफ द असेसी, ये सब प्रूव करना पड़ेगा। अगेन 68 में एडिशन कब होगा? फर्स्ट थिंग, मैंने लोन ली है प्रशांत भाई से, so I need to explain 3 parameters. First parameter is there that identity of the payer is proved, कि प्रशांत भाई exist करते हैं, मैंने prove करना है। First thing. Second thing, भाई प्रशांत भाई has a capacity to pay me a loan of rupees 50 lakh, so I need to prove the credit worthiness. Second thing. Third thing, I need to prove the transaction is genuine. फॉर एग्जाम्पल इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट ने बोला भाई प्रशांत भाई है, हाँ है, उसके पास पैसे देने की कैपेसिटी है, हाँ है, तो प्रशांत भाई से हमने पूछा आपने पैसा दिया है, नहीं दिया है, whether transaction is genuine, answer is no. If Prashant Bhai says yes, I have given a loan, so I have complied these 3 conditions, if I comply these 3 conditions, then 68 addition cannot be made. Anywhere in the law it is not written कि आपको इंटरेस्ट पे करना जरूरी है when you take the unsecured loan. So normally what happens, अगर मेरे घर में ही है, my wife, my parents are there, from whom I taken the loan और इंटरेस्ट पे नहीं कर रहा हूँ, it is quite reasonable, you can say. But for example कोई unknown person ही है जिसके पास आपने पैसा लिया है और आप इंटरेस्ट पे नहीं कर रहे हो, so normally department will not agree कि आप इंटरेस्ट पे क्यों नहीं कर रहे हो. So at that time to prove that unsecured loan is genuine, वो prove करना थोड़ा difficult होगा. But again nowhere it is mentioned कि इंटरेस्ट पे करना जरूरी है, ठीक है ना. Now another side is there. Sometimes what happen, for example मेरी बैलेंस शीट है, उसमें I have given advance, for example मेरी बैलेंस शीट है, I have given advance of 1 crore to प्रशांत भाई, मैंने एडवांस दी है, तो उनके बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट में अनसिक्योर लोन है, तो मैंने एडवांस ऐसे ही दी, इस पे इंटरेस्ट में चार्ज नहीं कर रहा हूँ. ऑन दी अदर साइड आई हैव टेकन दी लोन फ्रॉम दी बैंक wherein आई एम पेइंग इंटरेस्ट. सो व्हाट समटाइम डिपार्टमेंट डू दे से कि आपको जो पैसा मिल रहा है वो तो आप इंटरेस्ट फ्री दे रहे हो, तो वो पैसा इंटरेस्ट फ्री अगर दे रहे हो देन इंटरेस्ट एक्सपेंडिचर व्हाट यू आर क्लेमिंग शुड नॉट बी अलाउड. तो उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट से वो एक्सपेंडिचर डिसअलाउ करने की कोशिश करते हैं. पर अगर इंटरेस्ट कलेक्ट नहीं कर रहे हो ऑन योर लोन्स, इट हैज नथिंग टू डू विद द डिपार्टमेंट, वो आपका खुद का कॉल है. आपको चार्ज करना है नहीं करना है वो आपका कॉल है. ठीक है, डन. Hope that this question is answered. Next query is from Jigu ji. Sir, can you explain how to proceed with the section 119 of Income Tax Act? First of all, Jigu ji, 119 is a broad section. 119 has a section 119 says that board can give a power to condone the different delays. तो वो डिले इनकम टैक्स रिटर्न के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में भी है, ड्यू डेट में एक्सटेंड करने के लिए भी वही सेक्शन यूज होता है. तो आपके कौन से कॉन्टेक्स्ट में पूछ रहे हो? नॉर्मली 119 इज रिफर्ड in a context to अगर income tax return time पर फाइल नहीं हुआ है then we can make an application to commissioner, principal commissioner, CBDT to condone the delay in filing the return. उसके context में circular उसकी बात कर रहे हो? Jigu ji, I'm waiting for your reply. Okay, moving to next. Okay, next is एक third question. Yes sir, I want to claim a refund. अच्छा, Jigu ji काम करिए, just reminding me, this is a good topic. What is the question from the Jigu Bagasaria, that if a return is not filed on time and if you could have filed that return on time, you could have claimed the refund or you could have claimed the loss as a carry forward. तो उस केस में सर्कुलर है, वो हम बाद में कवर कर रहे हैं. That will be useful. Jigu ji मुझे याद करवाना प्लीज. Okay, moving to next. A controversy between a section 44AA and 44AD with respect to maintenance of the books of account. There is a bit controversy. I need to take a lots of example and need to tell you what is the existing provision. Then after I can explain you. तो काम करते ये टॉपिक क्लास में रखते हैं, ठीक है ना? Okay, next. If a person have an income from partnership firm only, can he claim depreciation on a personal car used by him against the business income of the partnership firm? So facts are something like this. There is a partnership firm between me and Prashant bhai. Name is for example XYZ company. अब मेरे पास जो इनकम आ रही है वो पार्टनरशिप फर्म से आ रही है प्रॉफिट की. सो अगेंस्ट प्रॉफिट तो एग्जेम्प्ट है, पर दूसरी इनकम कौन सी है? इंटरेस्ट एंड द सैलरी. So against the interest income from partnership firm or against the salary income from the partnership firm, can I claim some expenditure? So first of all, section 28 clearly says if any income is received from partnership firm, that is interest or salary, that will be business income. If it is a business income, all the expenditure which is allowable under the PGBP head can be allowed. Even a Supreme Court in one of the very old case has held that against the interest and salary income from partnership firm, one can claim the expenditure by fulfilling the condition given in 37(1). ठीक है ना? 37(1) में क्या लिखा हुआ है? That expenditure must be incurred for the purpose of business. तो आपने लोन अगर आगे से पैसा लिया है and the same amount is given to the partnership firm, so can I claim the interest expenditure? Answer is yes. If for a doing the I am getting a salary, तो सैलरी कब मिलेगी? जब मैं पार्टनरशिप फर्म के लिए काम करूंगा. तो काम करने के लिए obviously I need to travel in the car or maybe two-wheeler. If I am using my car for earning the salary, can I claim the depreciation car as a business expenditure? Answer is yes. But while doing that, always disallow 25% of the depreciation because car must also be used for the personal purpose. Done. So my answer to that query is that if your client is getting the interest or salary from the partnership firm, yes, you can claim the expenditure against that income, subject to fulfillment of the deduction of the respective section. Done. Okay, last question from the chat box. Then after I'm taking Sikhaji's query. What is the turnover of a business, including GST or excluding GST? So first of all, I'm assuming this query in context to 44AB. 44AB says if turnover is zyada hai, then there will be audit will be applicable. Just a minute. So 44AB says if a turnover is above the given limit, tax audit will be applicable. To refer 44AB, what is the word turnover gross receipts are the word used. Now whether that word turnover will also include GST, first of all in the income tax law, the word turnover or gross receipts are not defined anywhere. तो इनकम टैक्स में कहीं भी डिफाइन नहीं है, पर हाँ गाइडेंस नोट जो आईसीआई की है ना, वहां लिखा है कि टर्नओवर और कैलकुलेटिंग टर्नओवर जीएसटी शुड नॉट बी इंक्लूडेड. सो एज पर माय अंडरस्टैंडिंग आल्सो व्हाइल कैलकुलेटिंग टर्नओवर जीएसटी इंक्लूड नहीं करना चाहिए. हाँ, हमने जो टीसीएस और टीडीएस की प्रोविजन है ना, टीडीएस की प्रोविजन है 194Q, दैट टीडीएस ऑन परचेज, वहां टीडीएस ऑन परचेज कब होगा? व्हेन purchaser's turnover in the preceding financial year is more than 10 crore. And same is the case of TCS. I need to collect the TCS on sale of the goods when my earlier year's turnover is more than 10 crore. In this section, this is a TDS on purchase is a 194Q and TCS on sale is 206C 1H. 1H is a subsection. So in that context, department has issued the circular wherein they have mentioned while calculating this limit of turnover for the section, you don't need to include the GST, or if it is a mention separately. So in that context also we can say कि turnover गिनना है तब आपको GST include नहीं करना है, subject to condition कि GST अलग से दिखाया हुआ है. Obviously, if your client is covered in the composition scheme, तो वो GST collect करेगा ही नहीं. तो उसको for example 1 करोड़ का turnover है तो 1 करोड़ पे 1% पे कर देना है. As a composition dealer, he has to pay 1% GST. In that case, you can't say it is a 99 crore turnover. Your turnover is still 1 crore. Is that clear? अच्छा, TDS कैश ट्रांजैक्शन के लिए कैलकुलेशन 5% कैश ट्रांजैक्शन. अच्छा, ये एक अच्छा क्वेश्चन है. फॉर द पर्पस ऑफ TDS प्रोविजन, तो TDS के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में सर्कुलर में क्लैरिफिकेशन है कि उसमें आपको टर्नओवर जो गिनना है ना. अगेन आई एम रिपीटिंग, TDS प्रोविजन में क्या लिखा हुआ है? In my case, I need to deduct TDS on purchase only when my turnover in the preceding financial year is more than 10 crore. उस केस में टर्नओवर में जीएसटी इंक्लूड होगा. तो सर्कुलर है जिसमें लिखा हुआ है जीएसटी इंक्लूड नहीं होगा, subject to condition that GST is mentioned separately. Done. Now, second last question in that is calculation of 5% cash transaction. So first of all, let me frame the question properly. 44AB section is applicable is says when tax audit will be applicable. In that it is a mention that if my turnover is below 10 crore and my cash receipts and cash payment is restricted to 5% only, then in that case I need not to get my accounts audited. तो इस context में turnover कैसे गिनेंगे उसकी बात कर रहे हैं. तो एक काम करते हैं, let me share with you the 44AB provision itself. Shall I refer? Relevant है ये? Okay, I'm sharing rather. Visible है word file. This is a nothing but 44AB. So every person carrying on business shall, if his total sales turnover gross receipt as the case may be in the business exceed 1 crore rupees in a previous year, provided that in the case of a person whose aggregate of all amounts, again provided that in the case of a person whose aggregate of all amount received including amount received for sales turnover or gross receipt during the previous year in cash does not exceed 5% of the said amount, and aggregate of all payment made including amount incurred for expenditure in cash during the previous year does not exceed 5% of the said payment. अब क्वेरी ये है, जब ये 5% गिन रहे हो ना आप, उसमें आपको जीएसटी भी गिनना है. इफ यू रीड दिस प्रोवाइजो, यहाँ सिंपली लिखा है आपका कैश रिसीट और पेमेंट वो 5% ज्यादा नहीं होना चाहिए. सो इस केस में मुझे ऐसा लगता है यू डोंट नीड टू सेग्रीगेट द पेमेंट फॉर द गुड्स एंड पेमेंट ऑन बिकॉज ऑफ द जीएसटी. तो आपको यहाँ क्या करना होगा मेरे हिसाब से, ओपन दी कैश बुक। तो कैश बुक में डेबिट साइड कितना आ रहा है पैसा, फॉर एग्जाम्पल है 10 लाख आ रहा है, तो आपने 10 लाख कैश रिसीव किया। बाद में आप बैंक ओपन करिए, बैंक में डेबिट साइड कितना आ रहा है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल वो है आपका 2 करोड़ है, बैंक में डेबिट साइड है वो 2 करोड़, मतलब आपने बैंक चेक से कितना पैसा लिया 2 करोड़, और कैश से कितना लिया 10 लाख, टोटल पेमेंट कितना हुआ 2 करोड़ 10 लाख। 2 करोड़ 10 लाख में 5% कितना होगा, इट मस्ट बी 10 लाख से थोड़ा ज्यादा होगा, एम आई राइट। तो आपका कैश रिसीट 10 लाख ही है, यस, मतलब 5% से कम है, एम आई राइट। दिस इज द वे यू नीड टू कैलकुलेट एज पर माई अंडरस्टैंडिंग। तो आपको जीएसटी एक्सक्लूड नहीं करना है एज पर एज द कैश रिसीट एंड पेमेंट्स आर रिलेवेंट। Am I clear? Shall I explain this again? Okay. सेम वे आपको कैश पेमेंट कितना हुआ है उसके लिए भी आपको कैश बुक का पेमेंट देखना है, मतलब क्रेडिट साइड। कैश बुक ओपन किया, कैश में क्रेडिट साइड कितना दिख रहा है, दैट इज योर पेमेंट्स। फॉर एग्जांपल वो पेमेंट आपका 5 लाख है और बैंक आपने ओपन की, उसमें सारे क्रेडिट एंट्रीज देखी जो आपकी पेमेंट्स है। क्रेडिट एंट्रीज मतलब बुक्स में क्रेडिट एंट्रीज, वो आपके सारे पेमेंट्स है। तो वो कितना हुआ, फॉर एग्जाम्पल वो 2 करोड़ हुआ, तो 2 करोड़ का पेमेंट चेक से हुआ है और 5 लाख का पेमेंट कैश से हुआ है। तो आपका टोटल पेमेंट कितना हुआ 2 करोड़ 5 लाख। अब उसका 5% कितना होगा, वो तो 10 लाख से ज्यादा होगा, आपका पेमेंट कितना है 5 लाख की है, देन यू आर कंप्लाइंग दिस प्रोविजंस। दिस इज द वे यू नीड टू कैलकुलेट। इसमें आप परचेज सेल्स में जीएसटी सेग्रीगेट मत करना क्योंकि प्रोविजन में क्लैरिटी नहीं है। इज दैट क्लियर? और वो लॉजिकल भी नहीं है, उन्होंने साफ बोला है आपका टोटल पेमेंट में कैश पेमेंट 5% से कम होना चाहिए। Is that clear? Okay, moving to next then. So queries are done. That part एक query chat box में बाकी है, yes.
Yes, sir.
If we have not replied to intimation under section 143 within 30 days and not showing in a pending proceedings on IT portal, then how to deal? शिखा जी, आपकी क्वेरी थी, मैं रिपीट कर रहा हूँ। आपने रिटर्न फाइल कर दिया, रिटर्न के रिप्लाई में दे हैव इशूड द नोटिस फॉर एडजस्टमेंट अंडर सेक्शन 143(1)(a). एम आई राइट? अब वो नोटिस के सामने आपने रिप्लाई फाइल नहीं किया विद इन 30 डेज, तब आप फाइल नहीं कर सकते। तो पोर्टल पे इसका रिप्लाई फाइल नहीं कर सकते या फिर वो नोटिस ही नहीं दिख रही है, तो आपके हाथ में कुछ नहीं है, जस्ट वेट फॉर द इंटीमेशन अंडर सेक्शन 143(1). अगर इंटीमेशन के सामने अगर आपको लगता है कि नहीं ये तो एडजस्टमेंट गलत हुआ है, then one can file the appeal, first appeal, and second option you can write to the commissioner under section 264. अगर आपको ऐसा लगता है कि mistake apparent and record है, then you can also file the rectification return. But practically rectification return के outputs बहुत कम आते हैं and 264 में आंसर पॉजिटिव नहीं आता है। 264 is a section wherein you can apply to commissioner if something wrong has happened. कुछ condition है वो comply हो तो one can do that. So these are the 3 options, and most visible option is the appeal, as per my experience. Is that done, Shikha ji? Great, thank you. Next is a query, proprietorship firm. I cannot read the name completely, so whatever. Proprietorship firm started on February 2022, having a turnover of 25 lakh for year ended on 31st of March 2022. Okay, so financially 11, 21, 22 turnover 25 lakh है. In this case, the depreciation of a machinery amount is 50 lakh. The machinery का depreciation 50 lakh है. Audit is required or not? First of all, देखिए आपका टर्नओवर बिजनेस है ना, आपका प्रोप्राइटरशिप फर्म स्टार्टेड हैविंग अ टर्नओवर, तो ये आपका बिजनेस है। वैशाली जी, I'm assuming it is a business. Okay, done. It is a business. So business का turnover 25 लाख ही है, तो इसमें 44AB क्या कह रहा है कि 1 करोड़ से कम है तो ऑडिट एप्लीकेबल नहीं है। That's it. So audit will not be applicable in this case. Either you are going for 44AD or not. It doesn't matter. क्योंकि this is the first year. तो इस केस में आपका ऑडिट एप्लीकेबल नहीं होगा। Doesn't matter. आपका डेप्रिसिएशन 50 लाख है। डेप्रिसिएशन कैन नॉट बी पार्ट ऑफ टर्नओवर। ICAI की गाइडेंस नोट में ऐसा लिखा है कि आपका टर्नओवर अगर फॉर एग्जांपल सेल्स 10 लाख है पर परचेज आपकी 2 करोड़ है, then purchase can be termed as at your turnover, but depreciation cannot be. So in your case, the audit is not applicable. Okay, for carry forward of loss. अच्छा, आपको loss मतलब रिटर्न फाइल टाइम पर नहीं किया है and your loss है, so you need to carry forward the loss now. Am I right? Again, I'm repeating the question. In your case, 25 lakh is the turnover and there is a loss and you have not filed your return in time. First of all, over here, whatever loss is there, that loss pertain to depreciation. And for carry forward of the unabsorbed depreciation, there is no requirement to file the return in time. आपने लेट फाइल किया है तो भी अनएब्जॉर्ब्ड डेप्रिसिएशन आप कैरी फॉरवर्ड कर सकते हो. आपका लॉस कैरी फॉरवर्ड नहीं हो सकता, बट दैट शुड बी बिजनेस लॉस. In your case, it is not a business loss; it is an unabsorbed depreciation. Is that clear, Vaishali ji? Great. Okay, I think I have exited the time. Oh, sorry. I have exited the time, Sanjay
Yes,
bhai?
sir. Yes, sir.
कैसा रहे जो साहिब हमने तो खबर नहीं पड़ती. एक काम करूँ छू तो these are the queries. बीजी की queries होए तो I think we can take up after the 6 when the Jigar bhai complete his session. I'm no time मारे खाबो ना जी.
ಇವಾಗ ಕರು ಕೋಲು.
So Sanjay bhai, shall I end up my session over here?
Yes sir.
Okay, sir.
Okay, done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, you are sharing such a wonderful knowledge with us, and for that I am very, very thankful to you. Your sharing knowledge is very useful to our members, sir. Very, very useful. Thank you so much, sir.
Pleasure is mine, no, Prashant bhai.
Sanjay bhai, Jigar
Yes.
sir join થઈ ગયા છે?
છે. Yes.
Okay, sir. Welcome, Jigar sir. Hello.
Just a minute. Jigar sir, I call.
Jigar bhai આવી ગયા છે ને?
Okay.
પતંગ ભાઈ?
Yes. Welcome, Jigar sir.
Welcome sir.
Sir, kindly unmute yourself. Sanjay bhai.
Just a minute. Okay. Welcome
How-
Jigar sir.
Welcome, sir.
હા હવે પોસિબલ છે કારણ કે એવું હતું કે પાર્ટિસિપન્ટ ને અનમ્યુટ ન કરી શકાય because the protocols are amazing at the વરાછા કતારગામ સ્ટડી સર્કલ. સો એવું કારણ કે IPL ની સીઝન હોય ને અત્યારે ધોની જ એડવર્ટાઇઝમાં દેખાય એટલે ઓલરેડી બેટેડ અમેઝિંગલી and he has aptly given very kind advices to all the queries and done a lot of justice. પણ કેવું કે ધોનીની બેટિંગ ચાલતી હોય ને ત્યારે છેલ્લી ઓવર બાકી હોય ને તો બી છેલ્લો બોલ તો જોવો જ પડે. So Divyang, you have not overshoot your time because I have joined quite late. Of course, before I start my session, I would like to say thanks to Divyang કારણ કે સવારે સંજયભાઈ સાથે વાત થઈ ને ત્યારે એવું નક્કી થયું હતું કે I will take first and Divyang will take from 5 to 6. But because of some summon matter at the department, 3:15 મેં દિવ્યાંગને ફોન કર્યો, દિવ્યાંગ એક લોચો પડ્યો છે. I'll have to stay longer at the department because એક issue critical has creep up અને અત્યારે જો રિઝોલ્વ નહીં થાય ને તો લિંગરિંગમાં મજા નહીં આવશે કે વાંધો નથી તું લઈ લે પણ મેક શ્યોર કે તું 4:45 સુધીમાં જોઈન કરી લે. So thank you so much Divyang for this generous, candid and quick support to me, and at the same time thank you Sanjay also for enabling me as a speaker. I don't know કારણ કે મને જ્યારે દિવ્યાંગનો ફોન આવ્યો કે સંજયભાઈ સાથે વાત થઈ છે અને તું મારા સાથે રહેશે સ્પીકર તરીકે, I said કે તારી જોડે ખાલી ફોટો બી આવે ને તો માણસને મજા પડી જાય. So I said yes, of course it would be an honor. અને he said કે આ સ્ટડી સર્કલ એટલું એક્ટિવ છે ને કે જો ફિઝિકલ થાય ને તો મિનિમમ 125 જોવા મળે પણ અત્યારે 160 પ્રેઝન્ટ છે. So obviously આ વર્ચ્યુઅલ નો એક ડ્રોબેક છે પણ ફિઝિકલ હોત તો કદાચ વધારે મજા આવી હોત for having a longer interaction with one-on-one with many of the members as well.
Been noted sir.
Well, welcome, sir. On behalf of Varacha Katagam CP Study Circle, we welcomes to you. So friends, the second session I have arranged on a topic of year-end compliance on GST. And for that, we have a very eminent dynamic speaker, CA Jigar Parikh sir from Baroda. Now I request to CA Tirthraj Monpra to give an introduction of sir. Please, Tirthraj Monpra.
Thank you, Prashant Bhai. Good afternoon to all. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, CA Jigar Parikh. He is fellow chartered accountant. He is in full-time practice in the field of goods and service tax and was attached to as well central indirect tax law, namely central excise and service tax, apart from internal audit. He is looking after Vadodara office of Messrs. HJP and Associate LLP, chartered accountants, and is a managing partner of the firm. Prior to joining practice in 2013, CA Jigar Parikh had worked with BSR and Company Chartered Accountants, part of KPMG Network, and BDO Consulting Private Limited, Hari Bhakti in Mumbai, for over 2.5 years. He was also associated with Messrs. M. Nirav and Associate, a tax advocate firm, dealing exclusively in litigation of central excise, custom and service tax situated at Mumbai. Apart from being a member of Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, he is also member of Bombay Chartered Accountant Society, All India Federation of Tax Practitioners, Central Gujarat Chamber of Tax Consultant, JCI Vadodara Alkapuri, and NGO. He has conducted various GST sessions on certification course organized by ICWI. He is also enrolled as a faculty for GST training at Ahmedabad. He had delivered various lectures at Bharuch, Baroda, and Anand branch for WIRC of ICI, as well as Central Gujarat Chamber of Tax Consultant in the field of indirect taxes. So, with this, please help me to welcome CA Jigar Parikh.
Thank you, Tirthraj Bhai.
Sir, if you have any PPT, please share it.
I'll share. મને host co-host બનાવી શકશો because
Yes,
host
yes.
message આવે છે કે host has disabled participant screen sharing એટલા માટે.
સર તમે ઓલરેડી કોસ્ટ છો.
હું screen share નથી like host disabled participant screen sharing મને હજુ પણ એ મેસેજ આવે છે સંજયભાઈ.
જીગરભાઈ પારીખ છે ને બે એકાઉન્ટ છે જીગરભાઈ પારીખ ના એકમાં કોસ્ટ છે ને એકમાં નથી જેમાંથી અત્યારે વાત કરી રહ્યા છે ને એમાં કોસ્ટ નથી.
મેં એટલા માટે રાખ્યું છે કે if there is a connectivity issue then I can directly without interruption I can switch to mobile એટલા માટે મેં મોબાઈલમાં ઓન રાખેલું છે that's the only thing.
Okay, sir. Not a...
Okay, sir. Now you have cost.
Now you are a cost.
Okay. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Sanjay bhai. Fine. So, before I start with my session, I would like to start with a question to Divyang. Divyang, you have discussed numerous aspects about the compliance, including the one which is reflected in the annual information report AIR about the turnover which is being reflected. Now, just a small twist to it. GST માં છે ને આખું technology based થઈ ગયું છે. And there is a form called as GSTR 2A. જેમાં મારા બધા inward supplies આવી શકે. In simple language, all my purchase and expense will form part of it. So in a given scenario, let's say someone has fictitiously used my GST number to upload the transaction and I have no clue to it. But વર્ષના અંતે જ્યારે આખા વર્ષનું 2A ડાઉનલોડ કર્યું ને મારા બુક સાથે જ્યારે પર્ચેસનું reconcile કરતો હતો તો I came to know કે ભાઈ આ જીગર એન્ટરપ્રાઇઝ પાસેથી તો હવે કોઈ માલ લીધો જ નથી ને 50 લાખ રૂપિયાનું અહીંયા પર્ચેસ દેખાડે છે. So will the income tax department treat the transaction as a bogus purchase and have some repercussion onto this?
First of all, in this question, let's take from an example because example is a very easy method. I have a 2A wherein shown by Jigar Parikh has shown some sale. So it is my purchase in my 2A. So my 2A showing a purchase of rupees, for example, 3 lakh. Now that purchase is not recorded in my books of account and my contention is that is not my purchase. So departments can treat it is a bogus if it is not purchased from my side. I can prove by this means. First of all, I don't have make the payment through a banking channel. So अगर सामने वाला ऐसा बोल रहा है कैश में रिसीव किया है, I don't think so. So first of all, I need to prove this is not paid by me at all. Now still he is claiming other person. Department अगर इसको bogus treat करना चाहता है, so in the income tax proceeding there is a one terminology used which is also used under law. There is a principle of natural justice. So for example, जिगर भाई से इसके मैंने सेल किया है, so based on the जिगर third person's statement, some addition or some disallowance cannot be made in my hand without of the opportunity of the cross examination of that person. So I need to ask for the principle of natural justice cross examination. I need to say I don't have make any payment. The same transaction also took place in context to TDS. In a very old case, उसमें हुआ क्या था? Is the MB Valley. The MB Valley is a form through a company. So किसी के account में, for example, 1 crore का payment दिख रहा है. So some person has said कि भी MB Valley ने payment किया, इस पर TDS उसने 10% कर लिया, तो 10 लाख का TDS दिख रहा है, और 1 crore इस बंदे ने पैसे लिए हैं, ऐसा दिख रहा है 26 years में. So that person ने क्या किया कि मेरे बैंक अकाउंट देख लीजिए, मेरे बैंक में पैसे नहीं आए हैं, and I don't have claimed the TDS. So in this case, you need to prove कि भी मैंने ये परचेज नहीं की है, मैंने इसका पेमेंट नहीं किया, मेरा बैंक अकाउंट देख लीजिए. दूसरा, मैंने इसका GST का क्रेडिट नहीं लिया है. And third thing, please allow me to cross examination of that person. Why he saying so? मेरी परचेज तो है नहीं. अगर चेक से किया है तो बैंक में दिखना चाहिए, अगर कैश में किया है तो मैंने तो नहीं दिया है कैश से. Only this can be the outcome. तो सच में वो बोल रहा है मैंने कैश में लिया है. It is a complicated case.
Okay, so just to add what Divyang has said from the perspective of a litigation, that is constitutional right about granting an opportunity of being heard. One more thing, what the assessee may do, which is an ideal compliance scenario, that he has to intimate his range with respect to number of transactions which are forming part of 2A, which are not belonging to that particular assessee. For example, દિવ્યાંગે કીધું કે જીગર એન્ટરપ્રાઇઝ જોડેથી મેં કોઈ ટ્રાન્ઝેક્શન કર્યા જ નથી. So what Divyang will have to do, he will have to intimate a letter duly having the stamp into it. If not, then maybe an RPID to the range jurisdictional superintendent. Because જ્યારે ઇન્કમ ટેક્સમાં ઇસ્યુ આવશે ને ત્યારે જો આ 4 વર્ષ પહેલા એક RPID કરેલું હશે ને, so that will really help to prove our bona fide with respect to the transaction which has otherwise not incurred at our end. So thank you, Divyang, for adding a flavor with respect to the litigation from income tax side as well. So moving further to the today's topic with respect to the year-end compliances under GST, what we have to do is, because we all know that GST is all about the reconciliation. કારણ કે Excel જો આવડતું હોય ને તો GST આવડે. At least compliance practice તો definitely આવડે. That's what we have been observing over past 4 years. So when we talk about reconciliation, there are two fundamental aspects that we need to take into consideration. The first is revenue and the GST liability, and the second one is expense and the input tax credit. So I have segregated the entire financial statements into two segments. एक अपनी credit side आवे ने एक debit side आवे. जे credit side છે એના ઉપર મારી liability ની implication છે, અને જે debit side છે એના ઉપર liability અને input tax credit એ બંનેની implication છે. So these are the two fundamental things that we have to take care when we talk about the year-end compliances. To begin with the revenue side, આપણને બધાને ખબર છે કે we all are filing, or in our offices the GST returns are being filed through our team. એમાં દર મહિને અથવા તો ક્વાર્ટરલી એક GSTR 1 જાય છે અને દર મહિને પેમેન્ટ થાય છે, અને ક્વાર્ટરલી 3B અથવા તો મંથલી 3B ફાઇલ થાય છે. So when we talk about form GSTR1, that is a statement of outward supply. It is not a return per se. આપણે એવું કહે કે GSTR1 return ભરાઈ ગયું. That's a candid language. But when we talk about the law, it's only a statement which contains the details of our outward supplies. એટલે મારું sales freeze થાય છે GSTR1 થકી. હું 3B ની વાત કરું તો it's a summary statement which is now in form of return by virtue of Rule 61 sub Rule 5. Which says that I have a summary figure of my sales, I have a summary figure of my input tax credit. હવે જ્યારે હું summary figure of input tax credit ની વાત કરું તો obviously એનો બેઝ જે છે એ expense ની ફિગર મારા P&L માં ડેબિટ કોઈ જગ્યાએ કોઈ એક અકાઉન્ટિંગ હેડમાં થયેલી છે. So this is where the primary reconciliation with respect to 3B and GSTR1 needs to taken care. This entire one line summarizes આજનો હાર્દ કે year-end compliance under GST શું હોય. So focusing on the revenue, I need to first reconcile my outward supply which is reflected in my GSTR1 with my summary details in my GSTR 3B. Because in GSTR 3B, I am only going to punch a figure which is at 3.1A, 3.1B, 3.1C and 3.1E. D માં RCM આપણે લખીએ છે. A માં taxable outward supply આવે છે, B માં zero rated supply છે અને 3 માં exempt supplies છે. So in aggregate, my revenue figure consists of three angles: my income, indirect income and those income which are exempt in nature, જેમ કે interest છે, વટાવ કસર છે. હવે ઇન્કમ ટેક્સ એંગલ થી આ બધાને ટર્નઓવરમાં કન્સિડર કરાય, બટ જીએસટી એંગલ થી જરૂરી નથી કે અમુક વસ્તુઓ ટર્નઓવરના ફોર્મેશનમાં આવશે, because when we refer the meaning of turnover under GST, it is much wider, which is otherwise provided for the term income under GST. કારણ કે મારું મશીન સેલ થશે ને તો બી જીએસટી માં ટર્નઓવર જ ગણાશે. સો પોસિબલ છે કે હું ખાલી જો P&L ને જ કન્સિડર કરીશ ને મારા જીએસટી ના રિટર્ન સાથે, તો થોડું ઘણું રિકન્સિલિયેશન બનાવવું જ પડશે, કારણ કે અસેટ એલિમેન્ટ ક્યારે પણ P&L માં આવવાનો નથી. So this is freezing on the values. Parallel to values, we have a tax called as either interstate supply હશે તો IGST હશે, export હશે તો પણ IGST હશે, અને domestic transactions હશે તો it will be CGST and SGST. Sanjay bhai, I am comfortable with Gujarati or should I continue with English language, because I am comfortable in both?
Yes, sir. Continue in both.
Continue in both. Okay, sir. Absolutely fine. So on our P&L side, we have a major chunk of revenues. At the same time, we'll also have to look into consideration the balance sheet side as well. Another important aspect is that many a time we do the reversal of expenses. When we read the trial balance, we have incurred an expense of ₹100, out of which 40 rupees is reduced and net expense of ₹60 is being debited to my profit and loss account. It is quite possible that on the reversal of the expense, I might have paid GST on that. So when I compare my GST turnover, ideally it will be a credit side of my P&L plus the reversal of debit side, which is again an equivalent to the credit side. So this is again an important aspect with respect to value consideration. When we are doing a value matching reconciliation, we need to ensure that we also take the exercise hand in hand with respect to matching of my liabilities. Especially for MSMEs, I have observed over a period of time that in the accounting, we have only three ledgers: CGST, SGST and IGST. They do not have the accounting records with respect to input receivables and outward liability payable. Everything is in single. वो बोलते हैं ना कि हैदराबादी बिरयानी सब कुछ उसके अंदर ही जाएगा. But ideally speaking, we should have, or rather we should insist our clients to develop a practice to have our receivable ledgers separately grouped under current assets and have the payable ledgers grouped under the current provision and taxes under the accounting softwares, be it Tally, be it QuickBook, Zoho or any other software, whatever clients are using. Because this is where the fundamental points will help us when we are carrying out the exercise, or when we are asking our team, fellow colleagues, or we are asking the accountants of the client કે તમારું જે ઇલેક્ટ્રોનિક ક્રેડિટ લેજર છે જેમાં આટલું બેલેન્સ છે, શું તમારા બુક્સમાં આટલું બેલેન્સ બોલે છે? We give them GSTR1 consolidated report of the entire period. Do your P&L actually provide that particular thing? So unless the groupings are done fundamentally in the accounting appropriately, this exercise will take little more time from the perspective of reconciliation. So in coming period, let's focus on our clients who are more unorganized, considering the MSMEs, and develop them with respect to creating a habit, with respect to creating different input receivables. ઘણા મેં એવું જોયું છે કે they have only one GST receivable, GST payable. I see as there is no breakup in the accounting. So that has to be taken care for upfront when we are creating a data validation with respect to ledger creation in the accounting system itself. So digging deep into reconciliations, these are the branches of it. So that needs to be taken care. Coming to the expense and the input tax credit, which again goes hand in hand. We need to ensure that at the year end on 31st March 2022, the balance which is lying in my electronic credit ledger in GST portal in respective subheads, that is IGST, CGST and SGST, should be the same which is reflected in my books of accounts, except one minor variation which we will have in our books of account with respect to two ledgers again in the receivable side, because with the incoming provisions of GSTR 2B in the books of accounts, we are now aware that we will be able to take only that much credit which is duly found in our GSTR 2B, irrespective of the fact that we have received goods, we have received invoices. So what I'm trying to tell is the litmus test of claiming credit as provided under 16 subsection 2 of the CGST Act, although it is being met for, if the credit is not forming part of my 2B, I am not otherwise allowed to take the credit. If I take the credit, the consequences is that department will have a system generated differences, which I will have to reconcile, and I'll have to prove from my side that yes, I was eligible to claim this credit. And even if it was not reflected in 2B, I have claimed the credit. Now, digging deep in the same continuation of the discussion, recently I faced a challenge in one of my clients' cases that for the month of February 2022, when we generated 2B statement on 14th of March, there are certain transactions which are reflected in my 2A, but are not forming part of my 2B. So we had to raise a grievance. And based on the grievance, we had claimed the additional credit which were otherwise not forming part of my GSTR 2B. So the technological reconciliation reasons will always keep us engaged, keep our team engaged in making all detailed documentation that will help us and our clients to ensure that whenever the audit or the scrutiny notice comes after a period of time, it will safeguard us with respect to our intention of claiming the credit, because we all know that even if the credit is wrongly claimed and unintentionally utilized, section 50 will trigger and the interest application may come into picture because of that. Another important aspect is that we have to ensure that whatever expenses which are debited in my P&L, if those expenses are otherwise covered under the specified categories of inward supplies, I will have to ensure that the applicable reverse charge mechanism compliances has been done. So we all know that if I am buying from unregistered person, I being a builder, I have to ensure that at least 80% of my inward supplies, including input and input services, are coming from the registered persons. If there is a shortfall, the shortfall equivalent has to be paid at a rate of 18% under reverse charge mechanism, and the credit of the same may be claimed. There are many other expenses. I am using goods transport agency service. I am making payment to a director. I, being a private limited company, making payment to security services who I am engaging at my entrance gate. All these transactions are forming part of my P&L side debit in the books of accounts, on which the ideal service tax payments under reverse charge has to be done. If during the period under review, which is under 21-22, these payments are not made with respect to taxes, make sure that we have a golden opportunity of 3B for the month of March, that we make the payment of reverse charge mechanism in time, so that the interest portion is not triggering more and more. Similar to this, we have a unique provision with respect to reversal of input tax credits. Now I have said कि मैं 100 रुपया नो expense books में debit करियो छे. Now against this 100 rupee expense, I have accrued a credit balance of rupees 18. I am taking these figures in hundreds because of the ease of comfort. Surat na pramane figures kadach lakhs and crores ma hovi jo, because that's what the volume of business what Surat assessee deal with. So that 18 rupee credit is a credit which I have accrued or entailed in me with respect to inward supply. When I am talking about my revenues, as I said in GSTR 1, or as the case may be 3B, I have 3.1A, which is taxable thing, 3.1B, which is zero rated thing, and 3.1C of my GSTR 3B, which is the exempt supplies. So now in my financial statement also, I have an income which is taxable in nature as well as exempt in nature. So there is a unique provision under GST, more precisely section 17, subsection 2 and subsection 3, which in turn will take us to rule 42 and rule 43, which says that if my revenue consists of a taxable supply as well as exempt supplies, then my input tax credit will be restricted proportionately as per the prescribed manner. And this prescribed manner is provided under rule 42 and 43. Giving an example to this particular understanding, I have a turnover of 1 CR, of which 70 lakhs turnover is my taxable supply and 30 lakhs turnover is my exempt supply. So there is a ratio of 70:30. So logically speaking, if I'm not paying tax on those 30 lakhs, government says, boss, do not take the credit on those 30 lakhs. However, in deciding how much credit I am supposed to take, the government has given a mechanism. The government says through the provisions of the law that the credit which can be directly having nexus to 70 lakhs equivalent your turnover on which you are discharging your tax liability, you claim the entire input tax credit. You need not consider for the purpose of reversal. Whatever balance which is remaining, that balance will be regarded as a common credit, and this common credit needs to be applied with respect to reversals under Rule 42 and Rule 43. Now, of course, March is not the actual ultimatum with respect to carrying out this exercise. But the advantage of doing this exercise on or before March 2022, when we are speaking about this year and compliances, is that if in the earlier 11 months period, if the reversal has been short to an extent of the calculation, if we are making this additional reversal in the month of March, then I am not required to make the payment of tax. I am not required to make the payment of interest. Now, when we refer to the provisions of Rule 42, it says if there is a short reversal by virtue of the prescribed formulas, you can reverse the same up to September next financial year. But for that, I'll be required to make the payment of interest. So under GST, we all know the importance of working capital. કારણ કે 18% upfront GST payment માં block થઈ રહ્યા છે. And we all know that payments are not turning in time. When Divyang was taking the session, someone has said that I am not required to make the payment to the creditor. Then coming to that particular point, if I am not making payment to my creditors within period of 180 days as provided under 16(4), read with Rule 37 of the CGST rules, I will be required to reverse my input tax credit in my books of accounts. This is one notorious provision that will really trigger the pockets of the revenues when they are coming for the audit. Because what will happen, let's say I have procured an advice with respect to drafting from Divyang with respect to filing an appeal before tribunal, and Divyang is charging 1 lakh rupees to me. On that, 18,000 rupees is the credit. Now, obviously, હું દિવ્યાંગને કહીશ કે હિયરિંગ આવે ને ત્યારે હું તમને પેમેન્ટ કરીશ. હવે પોસિબલ છે કે ટ્રિબ્યુનલમાં તો હિયરિંગ 2-3-4 વર્ષ બી આવી શકે છે. So if I am not making full payment to Divyang, and if I am not making payment of GST also within period of 180 days, then department will tell me that you have not made payment to your supplier, and for that reason, the credit equivalent to 18,000 which you have availed, ideally you were supposed to reverse. And because you have not reversed, you will be required to make the payment of interest. Now, an interesting point over here, if we read the provisions carefully, it says failure to make the payment. Now, what constitutes a failure is a point of perception. So, if along with a consensus of a client, if we say that, yes, I have agreed to make the payment to Divyang at the point of end of 3 years, then I can very well say that there is no failure at my end. And for that reason, I am not required to reverse my input tax credit. So it will be a very subjective thing, and each and every time, whenever at the year end, very specifically on 31st of March, if my creditors are outstanding for more than 118 days, identify that is there a genuine failure of payment to it. If so, ensure that the pro rata input tax credit is duly reversed. So we have gone through the matching of electronic credit ledgers, matching of reversal, the short provision, if any, to save the interest. If there is an excess reversal, I still have time to reclaim up to September. I can very well claim in March as well, or I can claim within 6 months from the end of the financial year, that is September 2022. We also touched upon reverse charge mechanism. We have also touched upon 180 days payment criteria with respect to reversal of the credit. Now, if you read my presentation, I have mentioned re-availment of ITC 180 days. So it is possible that in the earlier period, I would have reversed my input tax credit with respect to this reason that I have not made I have not made my payment to creditor, and I do not want to go into litigation whether the failure is an absolute failure or otherwise. So for that reason, let's say in the month of September 2021, I have reversed my credit, and in the month of March, I have made payment to my creditor, and based on that, I am re-availing the input tax credit. So we all know that with respect to availment of input tax credit, the law provides a specific time period, which is up to September next financial year. 16(4), when we refer, it says to read it with Rule 36, and thereby we are having some inferences that by September, and now with the current amendment, they have made a specific date, which is 30th of November. So this is what we have to ensure, that if we have reversed earlier, ideally we should reclaim it because it will help us to ease our working capital. If I have missed it, and if I come to know after 30th of November, still there is no bar in the law with respect to re-availment of credit, because once credit availed within the time, the re-availment provision does not, like the barring provision does not trigger at this point in time, and I can very well re-avail my credit in the subsequent financial period as well. One thing which we need to really keep in mind is that whenever I am reversing my input tax credit, I will be adding the entire input tax credit reversal as a part of my P&L item. So if the financial year has completed, and if I am re-availing the credit, I will have to offer that particular credit value equivalent for the purpose of income tax as a part of my income, because we always follow the accrual system of accounting, and something which has a debit will also have a corresponding credit effect as well. Then moving to the detailed points which need to be taken care with respect to the compliances, these are only the highlight points. If member feel that there are certain additional points, yes, I am most welcome to correct myself, because this is what I could think of with respect to the compliance checkpoints that we as a chartered accountant can advise to our clients, so that they do not miss out with respect to either their liabilities, or they do not miss out with respect to their input tax credit. To begin with, we need to ensure that there is a reconciliation of the refund applied, refund received with the accounting entries. Over my past experience, I have envisaged scenarios, especially at the time of finalization of accounts with respect to either a company audit or a tax audit, that the accounting entries are not in sync with the ledgers which are there in the electronic portal, be it electronic liability ledger, electronic cash ledger, or electronic credit ledger. So this refund related reconciliation ideally should be in record with respect to 31st March 2022, or as the case may be every year March end, so that we will be able to know when was the refund filed, how much was the refund being granted, if there is a partial rejection, whether that credit has been duly recredited to my electronic credit ledger or not. Because many a time initially that used to happen, that if in case of partial excess of refund, the balance amount was not being recredited to my electronic credit ledger. And when we are doing the year-end closing balance exercises with respect to current asset receivable balance vis-a-vis the balance which is reflected in the GST portal, then this becomes a part of reconciliation. And this I've personally experienced in the year 2018 as well as in the year 2019. So whenever your clients are dealing into exports or zero rated supplies with payment of taxes, or under without payment of taxes, whereby you are going for refund for input tax credit, then this reconciliation exercise should be on record, because this will help us in the income tax as well at the time of finalization of the audits. Another important compliances is that those who are engaged in exports, and because of the crunch of working capital, they are not willing to do the exports of either service or goods on payment of taxes. We have a facility called letter of undertaking, which we need to furnish to the department on a yearly basis. So this compliances becomes more important for the initial days of the April 2022, because if I have a scheduled export in 2nd of April, and if I have not applied LUT prior to my exports, all likely department may deny my refund when I'm applying for the refund, or they may ask us to make the payment of tax on that, because it's a mandatory compliance to be done with respect to export procedures, more precisely zero rated procedure under the GST. So this is one important aspect. It could be either a fresh application if you have known outward supply transaction details of your client, or if your client is existing one who is regularly dealing into exports or supplying to SEZ, then make sure that we apply for the renewals of the letter of undertaking. Another important aspect which is now coming in for this financial year more specifically, year-end compliance, definitely yes, with respect to the e-invoices. We all know that government has started with implementation of e-invoices with a turnover of 500 crore, reduced to 100 crore, reduced to 50 crore, and now they are implementing the e-invoice compliances to all those taxpayers whose aggregate turnover from the period 2017-18 till the period 2021-22 has crossed 20 crores. Now, a normal understanding that what we will perceive is that Mara P&L ma 20 crore cross thaya છે કે નથી થયા. Ideally, this is not only P&L, this is P&L plus my balance sheet sales item as well, plus my those turnovers on which I have discharged my GST liability under reverse charge, plus my those turnovers on which I have made the payment of taxes by virtue of Schedule 1 index to the appendix to the GST Act. It means the deemed supply transactions. So because when we are talking about turnover, we have to ensure that we refer to the meaning which is provided under the GST and not merely the turnover which we apparently see under the income tax. So this is one important compliance that we need to gear up for the clients if not done so far. We still have little time. Coming to the same point with respect to e-invoicing, we also have to ensure that we have a vendor compliance in place in our organization. Why? Because whenever a supplier who is otherwise subjected to e-invoice provisions not following the same, the department can very well deny input tax credit in my hand, being a recipient. So Divyang Enterprise having a turnover more than 20 crore, not following the provision of e-invoicing, still issuing a tax invoice which are absolutely valid from the perspective of Section 31 read with Rule 56 and everything, that is fine. But when as a recipient, if I am not following the provisions, which is the input tax credit availment, because the document is not a valid document, it is not a valid tax invoice because it is not an e-invoice. Of course, when we go on the litigation side, the procedural plea can always be there. But in order to avoid the litigation front, it is better to go with the compliance, because it's always said that prevention is better than cure. So these are all prevention tips that we need to share with our clients, that if you are below 20 crores, but if you're above 20 crores and your supplier is also above 20 crores, ensure that you have in place the vendor compliances checklist as well. Moving further, we have something called as reconciling our TDS balances under GST. This is applicable mainly to those assessees who are having the government contracts, because government will deduct their 1% TDS, which I will be claiming it through filing of GSTR 7 return. So unless and until I file my GSTR 7 return, I will not be able to claim my GST in my electronic cash ledger. Now, those who are not familiar with this concept, I'll just take 2 more minutes to make this compliances in brief. Jigar Enterprise has entered into an agreement with Surat Municipal Corporation for the Swachh Abhiyan motto of Surat Municipal Corporation, and they have given me a turnkey contract of 50 lakhs. Now, referring to provision of Section 51, it says, whenever we have a government contracts or a contract with the specified entities who is otherwise required to deduct TDS upon making the payment, then at this point in time, whenever I am issuing my RA bills, which is the running bill which I am submitting to the Surat Municipal Corporation, against every bill, they will deduct one, apart from income tax TDS, they will also deduct my GST TDS, which if I wish to claim that TDS, I will have to ensure that the returns are filed by the government as well as I also file my return. So once I file my return, this amount will be credited to my electronic cash ledger, which will be available to me for the purpose of offset of my outward GST liabilities. So while making the accounting also, I'll have to ensure that whatever payments I have received from those corporations those entities who has deducted my GST TDS, I need to ensure that GST TDS is duly reflected as part of my receivables in the books of accounts. At the same time, it should also be ensured that on 31st of March, at least for the period April to February, GSTR 7 returns are duly filed by us, so that upon filing of return, I can claim those cash elements which are in form of my TDS. Moving further, we have something which is very important with respect to the composition taxpayer. So if a person who is not willing to follow the regular compliances, feeling burdened with respect to making payment of tax 5, 12, 18 or 28% slab, and want to ease his business life, then what he can do is that he can apply for a composition taxpayer. Like Divyang has given a wonderful example with respect to turnover criteria identification, that if you are into a composition, if you are having a turnover of 1 CR and you are making 1% payment of tax, then you cannot claim that my turnover is 99 lakhs. My turnover will still continue to be 1 CR. But if I intend to take the benefit of 1% in upcoming financial year, I have to ensure that I will have to make an application with respect to composition dealer before the start of the financial year. If I miss the bus is missed forever, and I'll be able to take the chance only in subsequent financial year. Another important aspect is with respect to quarterly return monthly payment taxpayers, that those who are currently into monthly return filers and wish to switch into QRMP return system, then up to 30th of April, the window is open, and for the first quarter itself, they can switch to QRMP. If we are missing this deadline, we would be able to make them the QRMP compliant taxpayer from the second quarter and not otherwise from the first quarter, which the client had the intention. કારણ કે ક્લાયન્ટના મગજમાં એવું હોય કે આપણે કહી દીધું છે એટલે થઈ જશે, અને જો ના થયું અને ક્લાયન્ટે 5, 12 કે 18% depending upon whatever his HSN equivalent GST rate, and if he has failed to discharge the liability, the entire onus will still fall on him only, irrespective of fact that his intention was very clear to go into the composition scheme. Another important point that we need to take into consideration is cross charge between the distinct person having a detailed working as a part of our internal management working paper documentation. So this is very unique scenario which has crept up in GST, that if I am having a multiple location GST registration number, whereby my head office is in one state and having different offices with a different state GSTN number, then both the entities will be treated as a distinct entities, and this will be mainly applicable with respect to the service compliance angle. Now, service being intangible, it is very difficult to identify how to measure how much service I have provided from one state to the another state, or from another state to the third state. So in this case, the provision of cross charge will be triggered, and we will have to bill to that particular entity to whom we have provided the services. Of course, I do agree that valuation is going to be challenging in time to come, even when the department also carries out the audit at respective locations. Even for the department also, this will be a challenging, but more from our side, because we will have to prove whatever value we are considering for the purpose of cross charge. And for that reason, I have mentioned that we need to substantiate our value amount through our detailed working. It could be certain pro rata percentage of overheads. It could be cost plus markup of the employees, whatever could be the method, but it has to be justified at our end. It's not necessary that the department may agree on the same. The valuation may not be challenged by the department only in a case where the recipient person, who is again my same PAN-based entity, is entitled to claim the entire input tax credit, because we have a proviso under Rule 28 which says in case of an associated enterprise transactions, if the recipient is entitled to claim the entire input tax credit, then whatever value declared by the service provider will be regarded as a valid value, and the valuation questions will not be triggered. I've already discussed in the initial slides that if the client is a builder, then this compliance is otherwise to be done on a monthly basis, because we have to ensure every month out of total inward supplies, what is my registered inward supply and what is my unregistered inward supplies. Aggregate, if it is less than 80%, then I'll have to, the balance amount, I have to ensure that it is being paid under reverse charge mechanism and the credit is to be claimed. So if not done over a period of 11 months, yes, for the aggregate entire period of 12 months, this exercise can be done. And in toto, if my amount of purchases with respect to input and input service are coming more than 80%, then it is safe to say that I have complied with this particular provision and there will not be any trigger with respect to making payment of reverse charge of the balance amount. Moving to the sales side, we will also need to reconcile our e-way bills vis-a-vis our tax invoice or e-way bill vis-a-vis our delivery challans, because we know that the provisions of e-way bill are meant for the purpose of movement of goods and not otherwise. So it is not necessary when an e-way bill has been generated, it is only with respect to sales. It is possible that I have sent some goods for the purpose of repair, it might have gone into delivery. Through a delivery challan, I might have sent certain goods for approval. It will again go in form of delivery. Over here, if there are certain stocks which are sent for approval, from the perspective of inventories, I'll still have to include those as a part of my stock lying with the recipient which are meant for the purpose of approval. And now over here also the government has given a cap. So if the goods are not coming back to me within the specified period of approval, in that case, the original date when my goods have moved out of my premise or the moves have directly moved from bill to ship to transaction, that date will be regarded as a deemed supply on which the payment of applicable GST will trigger from the perspective of my liability, which otherwise will have no effect on my financial statement. So these things we need to take care very minutely. Moving further, we have a verification of the closing inventory, which is a popular exercise to the organized sector and even the MSME sector, who believe to have the stock count, physical stock count in the month of March, especially to ensure that the data are matched with the accounting records. So in this scenario, if there are certain lapses with respect to shortage of inventory which is otherwise there in my books of accounts, and if this shortage in account of goods being lost, if I am recording that way in my books of accounts, then by virtue of section 17 I will have to ensure that I am reversing the credit equivalent to input tax credit, a portion to those stock which are now I am reducing from my books of accounts. So inventory exercise will be an important aspect with respect to identification of trigger point of reversal if there is a shortage in my stock. Many a time the client says in order to play with the figure of profit, there would be a tweak in the accounting heads vis-a-vis assets and the P&L. So original transaction which was otherwise classified as P&L item might move to the asset item or a deferred revenue item, meaning thereby it will be appropriated over a period of time. So if this expense is in the nature of capital, which is related to immovable properties, then this point really need to be taken care for, because initially while passing the accounting entries, we might not have claimed the credit, or vis-a-vis we might have claimed the credit if the expense, if the value has been debited to the profit and loss account. So whenever we are finalizing the books of accounts, which is part of the year-end compliance exercises, which is generally done in the first fortnight of April, this point really needs to be taken into consideration, that if I am changing my or I am realigning my accounting heads, the appropriate realignment of the input tax credit also needs to be done at the portal as well as in my books of accounts, because over a past period, while carrying out the exercise of tax audit and matching the expense with the input tax credit, we have observed that the client has done the needful with respect to accounting. But when we talk about કે GST માં effect તમે આની આપી કે ના આપી, ના સાહેબ GST માં આની effect રહી ગઈ છે. અને it's a sad that all the deadlines have extended beyond September. So most of the cases, this kind of identification exercise has happened post September only. and because of that, the credit might have been lost because the period of claiming credit has been gone by that time. So this, whenever we are realigning the expenses head from P&L to capital, this thing need to be taken care with respect to realignment of input tax credit as well. In line with the reconciliation of e-way bill, there is something also equally important, which again goes in sync with the stock taking exercise, which is the goods sent to a job worker or goods sent to the approval, which you already discussed. Many a time what we observe that whenever there is a purchase in books of accounts for which a debit note is being issued, because of the accounting mapping, this debit note will pop up in my GSTR1. So because of the GSTR1, I will end up paying my liability to it. Ideal scenario is I have debited my purchase by 100 rupees. I am reversing my purchase to the extent of 20 rupees because it is no longer from a part of my purchase. It's a goods return transaction for which I have raised a debit note. I have asked my supplier to raise a credit note. But these transactions are unknowingly reported in my GSTR1 and unknowingly forming part of my GSTR3B as well. The ideal scenario would have been that I was supposed to reverse the input tax credit in table number 4 of my GSTR3B in the other reversals, but that has not been done. Erroneously, this has been reported to my sales. Now, doing this kind of transaction may trigger my threshold limits with respect to audit as well. Hello.
થોડી વારમાં જોઈન્ટ થશે પ્રશાંત.
I think sir will be disconnect. Sir will join very, very soon. Hello. Am I audible, Sanjay bhai?
Yes. Sir, joint within 1 or 2 minutes. I think એક લોગિનમાં ચાલુ જ છે સરનું.
એક જ મિનિટ.
ના, લોગિનમાં એવું થયું છે પ્રોબ્લેમ કે as I anticipate there is some disconnect in the internet issue. Luckily I'm there on the mobile, so we can continue. That's not a problem. I'm also trying to log in through the system as well. So I was referring to the point of debit note having the outward supply effect. Similarly, we have a situation with respect to credit note as well, which are erroneously taken as my input tax credit in the books of account.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Fine. I will reshare my screen. Okay, so we were on this particular point with respect to debit note as my purchase and credit note with respect to my sale. So if we can highlight these transactions to accountant, if he has done any mistake, or through our team, if we can ask them to reconcile the debit note and credit note which has gone into portal in a unintentional form of either outward supply or reversal of input tax credit, we can take care of this within the month of March itself, so that at the time of filing of my GSTR 9 and 9C, which is post September event, I need not once again dig deep into the reconciliations. Because whenever there is a mismatch in the system, I am always prone to the notice, because this being a technological driven law, And now your income tax is going more advanced with respect to fetching data from the GST portal. If we can match our GST turnover with the income tax turnover, that would be icing on the cake. If not, then this kind of reconciliations, internal working really need to be taken care at our side. Another important aspect with respect to allowance of expenditure under income tax, that whenever we have made a delayed payment, make sure that we make the provision of interest in our books of accounts. We have observed that many a time, because of the crunch of working capital, the client will tell us કે 3B ભરવાનું છે પણ અત્યારે રૂપિયા નથી. So maybe within a span of 10 to 15 days, he is able to manage the money and he'll say કે સાહેબ ચલન બનાવીને મને મોકલી આપો, હું એનું payment કરી દઈશ. Now, when we are asking him to make the payment of interest as well, he says કે સાહેબ અત્યારે એના રૂપિયા નથી, I don't have enough money which I'm able to make the payment of interest. પણ જ્યારે notice આવશે ત્યારે એનું payment કરી દઈશ. So it is absolutely, his intentions are there to make the payment of interest, but if I'm not accounting for that interest in the current period expenditure, then in subsequent time, by way of a prior period expenditure, the due payment which is making in form of interest, which is otherwise an allowable expenditure from the perspective of income tax, will not be entitled to him, because that interest is not pertaining to that particular year in which he is making payment thereof. Followed by one more point is with respect to validation of GSTR 2A with the purchase or the expense, including the RCM liability. Now we all know that our going forward, say from January 2022 onwards, my input tax credit are largely driven in the form of GSTR 2B only and not GSTR 2A, which we had otherwise discussed in the original flowchart slide itself. However, by having said that GSTR 2B becomes a base document enabling us to make the claim of input tax credit, it is equally important that GSTR 2A still holds a lot of relevance with respect to our bona fide purchases, because that is where I started my session asking a question to Divyang, that in case where the purchases are reflected in 2A and not forming part of my books of accounts, what could be the consequences? Now I have a reverse situation. I have my okay, in the continue the same transaction, there is a legitimate transaction, but invoice misplaced થઈ ગયું છે, stock record માં એની entry miss થઈ ગઈ છે, and I have actually missed to book the transaction in my books of accounts. So through this technological tool which is throwing us GSTR 2A, we can actually have a reconfirmation from the client that those transactions which you are not approving, please once again recheck it, that does this any of such purchase or any of such expense which were otherwise throwing in GSTR 2A are really at your end only. Even after the GST put it into practice, with all due respect to the trade practices, there are certain trade practices which are still going off the record, which is termed as a parallel economy, whereby the original intent was to have a transaction out and out, but because of some difference in understanding, the supplier has punched the data in the GSTR1 portal, and for that reason, even the recipient will be otherwise bound to ensure that those transactions are also duly reflected in my books of accounts with respect to either my direct expense, that is the purchase, or indirect expense is in the nature of other overheads. In cases where I have support transactions which are not populated in my GSTR 2A, although my supplier is saying I have already uploaded your transactions in my GSTR1, I have those details, but because of the technological glitch, it is possible that one of the transactions or the entire lot of transaction may not be reflected in my GSTR 2A. So at this point in time, what we will be required to request our supplier is that kindly please send the screenshots of GSTR1 filed by you. This screenshot will have a GSTR1 filed status, which is the first page, followed by those page in which our GSTN number, that is our client's GSTN number, which is duly disclosed on the GST portal screen. Because this will help us when the GST audit comes, because we all know that GSTR 2A is a very dynamic document. Possible is that as on date on 22nd of March, the transaction is not reflected. but quite possible, say in the month of May 2022, the transaction may get reflect. But in between, if there is any inquiry, if there is any notice explaining us to have a reconciliation between the ITC claimed in 3B versus transactions populated in 2A, then such kind of screenshots will help and safeguard the assessee to defend their cases that the ITC which is claimed by them in 3B is not just illegitimate, it is a legitimate input tax credit duly uploaded in the portal by the supplier as well, but because of certain technical glitches, it has not been auto-populated into my GSTR 2A. Another important year-end compliance which I already touched upon is with respect to the deemed supply transaction. That is the transaction between the related parties which will not trigger any revenue implication, but still will have the tax implication on the same, because I have said we need to reconcile values. We also need to reconcile the applicable taxes, because if you recollect the first slide, it shows the revenue and the liabilities. So through this Schedule 1 deemed supply transaction, we would be able to identify the liabilities, if any, of our clients, which needs to be inculcated from the perspective of year-end compliances, so that we do not end up paying additional interest. The entire motto of running through this year-end checkpoints with each of our clients is to ensure that they do not make payment of interest. If any input tax credit has been missed, the credit can be claimed. If any credit note which has not otherwise been uploaded to the portal, the credit note can be uploaded. If there is tax effects of the credit note which has otherwise not been taken into consideration while filing 3B, meaning thereby I have paid the excess tax because I have not considered my credit notes, that can be taken care for. So for filing return for the month of March 2022, more precisely 3B, ideally we should have 11 months Excel ready with respect to the turnover which has been duly punched in the GST portal vis-a-vis the actual turnover data in the books of accounts, including the reversal of expenses. That will give us a fair idea whether the assessee is missing on the liability front or the assessee is missing on the input tax credit front. Through this, we'll be able to also identify if at all there are reversals triggering with respect to Rule 42 and 43. We will be able to take care of those particular points also, so that we can again help our clients to save the interest element to it, because we all know that Rule 42 and 43 indeed has little complex working to do. But once the working is done, we still have a time period up to September next financial year. But if we can do it in the month of March for the aggregate 11 months, yes, we are adding values to our client. Of course, it is quite possible that some of the professional colleagues will say that we are not getting any additional incentives in form of a consideration of our fees of doing all this year-end compliance perspective health check assignments. So what you can do is that you can guide the accountants of the client and ask them, give certain points and train them, so that this is what will add a real value with respect to the compliance services when we are providing the GST services to client. Because of late we all know that there are plethora of notices with respect to differences in 1 and 3B, or as the case may be 3B and GSTR 2A. So if this kind of reconciliations are done for at least 11 months starting from April to September, and the rectification effects can be triggered through GSTR 3B, then this will be of a great help to our own office staff as well, because this will help us to defend the letters or the notices which we are receiving from the department in time to come as well. So this is what the overall year-end compliance checklist or the health checkpoints that our client need to take into consideration through us, because unless we keep ourselves updated, we will not be able to pass on this message to the client as well. One more point which now I'm adding, which is not forming part of my presentation, which is otherwise very important, is that there is a rule called Rule 86 capital B, which has been put to practice in the year 2022 and now into effect in 21 as well. The particular rule says that if my monthly turnover is exceeding 50 lakhs, in that case, I will be mandatorily required to discharge my output tax liability in cash ledger equivalent to 1% of my liability. To reframe my statement in an example manner, if in the month of April 2021, the turnover of outward supply of Jigar Enterprise was 30 lakhs. May 35 lakhs, June 48 lakhs, July 58 lakhs, August 60 lakhs, September again 45 lakhs. So there are 2 months which are coming in the first 6 months which has exceeded 50 lakhs turnover. And if I have ample of unutilized input tax credit balance lying in my electronic credit ledger, still for the month of July and August in which my turnover has exceeded 50 lakhs, I will not be entitled to use the entire input tax credit as a purpose of my set off, because the law says I will have to discharge my liability equivalent to 1% through the compulsory electronic cash ledger. Failure to do this can trigger severe consequences with respect to upfront cancellation of my GST number. So that is the reason I said this small point has a large implication from the perspective of business. Of course, government is not at loss, but what government wants is that in order to curb the practice of fake invoice, in order to curb the practice of rolling in ITC switching from one person to another person, at least some element of cash needs to be deposited to the government, for which they have brought in this particular provision. And one person making payment in cash does not mean that the fake transactions are not in place, but somewhere the government is of the apprehensions that if not entire revenue, at least a portion of revenue is coming through the cash ledger. So this compliance really needs to be taken care at our clients' end as well, that if they have not complied in the existing financial year with respect to payment of their monthly liability, which is equivalent to 1% in the form of cash ledger, this needs to be taken care when we are filing the return for the month of March 2022. So this is all what I had to share with respect to the year-end checkpoint compliances from the GST perspective, adding to what Divyang has said with respect to the income tax as well.
Thank you, sir. Sir, if we have a time, then consider the query of members.
Of course, yes, sir. We can definitely take the question. Should I open the chat box?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Presentation એક વાર ખાલી અત્યારે stop કરું છું હું, so that I can enlarge the Zoom. કારણ કે પેલું Zoom ચાલતું હોય ને ત્યારે chat box માં the size is quite less. We have a query from Naresh Bhai. Query: in case of a job work, principal send good to me worth 2 lakh. I have done job work of 50,000. What should be the value in delivery challan when I am sending goods back to the principal? See, Naresh Bhai, and to all of you and including me, my answer to this particular thing, I am always telling my clients that when you are sending goods back through a delivery challan, જે તમારી goods ની value તમારા principal આપેલી છે ને એ જ value થી delivery ચલણ બનાવીને મોકલો. Of course, your tax invoice will have a much lower value because the element of work what you have done in the goods will be minuscule compared to the value of goods per se. So in case of delivery challan, I am recommending my clients to put the value which is there in the delivery challan of the principal supplier, because through ITC 04, with the form which we are filing for the purpose of job work also, we will be able to establish the value nexus with respect to our documentary transaction. Naresh bhai, am I answered to your question? Okay, thank you.
Sir, one another question is, can we take ITC of transfer fee paid on GIDC plot purchase if we are not doing anything on the plot and sell that to another party?
Okay, sir. This takes a characteristics of a service in the nature of immovable property. So this is a dicey situation because one view is that, of course, I'm not saying my view is correct. There's a school of thought like this is becoming an immovable property. It will add to the cost. The another view which says that as you are entitled to claim the input tax credit on the rights which you are transferring to the third person, you take the input tax credit, and the third person in turn again will take the input tax credit. So overall, what I am observing in Anand GIDC as well as in Baroda GIDC is that the practice is that whenever the leisure rights are being transferred to the business persons, they are charging GST, they are claiming the input tax credit, and they are utilizing the input tax credit which are having the nexus to their business transactions as well. So overall, the trade is now not willing to go into litigation that the rights into immovable property are in the nature of the rights in land are in the nature of immovable property and should not be subjected to tax itself. Because I am entitled to the input tax credit, the trade is now having convenient view with respect to stating that you claim the input tax credit and pass on the credit through your outward channels.
Okay, sir. Sir, one another question. In sir, in government contract case, some of government departments make payment in advance to supplier, while supplier raise the invoice in the next month, subsequent month, and henceforth department deducted TDS in the next month. In service case, we need to make payment on GST on advances. So in which month we require to generate e-invoice? That is whether in the month in which advance received or in a month in which invoice is raised to the government.
Sir, ideally, the law says for the purpose of discharge of liability, I am required to only make payment of taxes. Invoice will always be generated upon completion of services or upon completion of a milestone. So in such kind of scenario, when I am making payment of taxes, there will not be any e-invoices. E-invoice will be raised as and when my transaction milestone has occurred on which I am issuing a running invoice or maybe transactional invoice to the government authorities.
Okay, sir. Sir, there is a 180 days ITC reversal. If we are not making payment within 180 days, is this rule is applicable in import case or not?
Sorry, Prashant Bhai, are rule applicable? Can you go?
Import cases.
Import. No, this will not be applicable for the import cases because this rule specifically carves out the import in this kind of scenarios. It is only meant for the domestic transaction and supplies.
Okay. Sir.
Because in case of imports, we are claiming the credit based on the payment of IGST, which is directly paid to the credit of department, through which we are taking the credit. In case of a domestic transactions, we are passing on amount to the supplier, who in turn passes the credit to the government in form of either electronic cash ledger or credit ledger.
Okay.
So in case of imports, the restriction of 180 days are surely not applicable.
If member have any query, then kindly mute him or herself, please.
Physically હોત તો આપણે માઇક આપત, પણ અત્યારે વર્ચ્યુઅલ હેન્ડ રેઝ કરવાનું જ કેવું પડશે આપણે એમને.
I think there is no query from members.
There is one question. There is something which is Amrish Patel. Let me open the chat box. The GST department has identified goods lying in godown without GST bills. Also, there are certain off-paper transactions identified from diary. The GST department has issued a notice to pay GST on such goods, and we have paid also. Now, my question is how to pass accounting entries in such case. We will show B2C sales, but what about purchase? Okay, interesting one. The answer will depend on the period of identification, because this has a large ramification when we talk about from the income tax perspective. Do we have Divyang with us? Divyang, are you here in the room? No issue.
No, sir.
No issue. So I'll try to answer from his side also, because I'm not expert in income tax, because that is something which is being taken care from my partner side. So talking about GST, I have certain transactions which are not in my books of accounts. Amrish bhai, correct me if my understanding is wrong. કે ગોડાઉનમાં આજે સર્ચ થઈ અથવા તો એમ જ વિઝિટમાં સંબંધમાં આયા ઓફિસર અને મૂડ થયો કે લાવો રેકોર્ડ ચેક કરીએ, જે ટેકનિકલી કરી જ ના શકે. But if they are doing so and off the record transaction ની ડાયરી પકડાઈને ત્યાં આગળ મારા purchases બી identify થયા, I will have no other option but to ensure that my purchases are forming part of my books of accounts. over here, quite possible that I may not be entitled to claim the input tax credits because I do not possess any tax invoice. The entire amount will be booked as a gross in my P&L. With respect to sales, you already answered that yes, this transaction will be shown as B2C only. The problem what I was trying to indicate is that if my return has been filed for that particular financial year and those transactions if are duly popped up in the during the course of scrutiny or the investigation by the department, then I have a larger problem with respect to income tax as well, because under income tax these are the undisclosed transactions on which I'll be required to make the payment of tax penalty as well. And of course, this kind of transaction are prone and can trigger 148 as well, because the government can definitely think that this kind of activities you might have been doing in past as well. So we want to check these things as well. So this can trigger, like this GST scrutiny may trigger to the income tax investigations area as well. Amrish bhai, am I clear on this point? Yeah, अरे सर ना कोने तम जिगर कोन तो वधारे गमे. We all are professional colleagues, so that would be more comfortable to me as well. We have one more query after Amrish bhai, Gargi Lakhani, whether developed plot of land liable to GST. If yes, GST is liable only on development portion or the entire developed land. Gargi, my view is that the developed plot still retains the characteristics of a land only, and there is no requirement of making payment of GST on this. To tweak your question, along with the developed plot, there will always be certain developed infrastructure facilities which will always go hand in hand when we are buying the particular property. So to convert the convert example of Gargi into real scenario, let's say there are 10 pieces of land, of which 3 pieces are meant for common infrastructure and 7 pieces of land are meant for a sale. So of course, when I am selling this 7 piece, there will be certain demarcation of lands, plinth level સુધી એ લોકોએ પાળી બાંધેલી હશે ગુજરાતીમાં જો કહીએ ને તો, અને એ 3 જગ્યાએ કાં તો નાનો ગાર્ડન બનાવ્યો હશે, there would be a water tank or there would be community center or maybe a small conference room, something like that. So what you may do is that you can identify per square feet cost with respect to infrastructure, which you can take separately, charge 18% to it, and you can go with the registration of the land, including the value of infrastructure on which you have paid the GST. So let's say if my dastavej value of land is 50 lakhs and I'm taking 5 lakhs rupees in infrastructure, let the developer make payment of stamp duty on entire 55 lakhs, and you discharge your tax liability only to the extent of 5 lakhs, which is the infrastructure value only, whereby you are identifying the land value equivalent to 50 lakhs separately. Moving further to next question of CA Akshita is that if the client has received unregistered job work more than 20 lakhs and the job worker has not registered himself, then is there any consequence that the client has to face? Only one thing, Akshita, what we need to ensure that if the person who is not registered, in that case, we will have to ensure that his place of business is added as my additional place of business with respect to my compliances under GST. Otherwise, with respect to liability, it is his headache that he has not discharged the due applicable GST on the job work that he has carried on my goods. So from our end, what we have to ensure that the place of premise is added as a part of my additional place of business.
Okay, sir.
We have.
Okay, sir. Right now there is no any query from members, so we conclude it here.
Yes,
sir, your valuable 18 points that helps to comply the compliance part, which is very helpful to our members and in their practical practice. Now I request to see Arun Viridia for formal vote of thanks to our speakers.
Thank you, Prashant. I hereby thanks
our valued and honorable speaker, Divyang sir and Jigar Bhai Parekh, for sharing their views and their knowledge with us, which are day-to-day compliance. There is a mostly our day-to-day work is compliances, based on compliances. And year-end, all knows year-end compliances is the most important part. As in between during the year, if there anything we are missed, we can adjust the same in year-end compliances, so that in year-end balance sheets and year-end profit and loss account, which we have to file with the department and which we have to data share with department, is will be corrected as well with the applicable rules and laws. In that case, your valued opinions and your knowledge and experience on the particular topics are helpful to all the members, and we will in touch with you for in future also we are regarding these topics, and for your sharing of your knowledge. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again on behalf of all the members of Study Circle. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Arun Bhai. Arun Bhai, can I share my number in a chat box? Because I believe there are few 2-3 queries which is coming up in the chat box, and they can send me on a WhatsApp, and I'll be able to solve them. So that's fine.
Yes,
sir.
Sure.
Please share your mobile number in this group. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Jigar sir, for sharing your valuable knowledge and time with
Thank you,
us.
Sanjay Bhai, for this amazing opportunity to get connected with the wonderful chartered accountants of Surat.
Thank you. Any member have any question? Please send this message on sir's number. Please, sir, share your number.
Jigar Bhai already shared his number.
Okay.
I have shared in the chat box, Sanjay Bhai.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you. Here we conclude our session. Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.